Thank you. And if I forget to mention that to Zach when he gets in here,
Remind him.
or he's right here now.
There he is.
All right.
Move your
You are?
plate out of the way. Jesus. Zach.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the budget, combined budget select board meeting of Thursday, March 20th. We're here in the Parker Room, and we have, I think, a full house of select board members and budget committee members. We had our first budget committee meeting on Tuesday night, and all of these will be live streamed. So if you're catching us tonight and are curious what happened Tuesday night, you can find that online. Tonight, we're going to start with Liz Lowe and cemeteries.
And Mike.
And
yes.
Mike, sorry.
We don't leave Mike out.
No, Mike's very important.
Okay, so 3:33.
Yeah, 3:33.
3:33, yes.
So just to give a quick sense of how cemeteries works, it's a little bit of a team effort. I am the sexton for the town of Rockport, which means I'm responsible, but I'm responsible for everything anyway, so teamwork makes the dream work. So we have Ben Pratt, who is the deputy sexton, who is the one who really does the work. When you see things done in that cemetery and someone taking down a tree and picking up things that, geez, why is that there? Ben's the one. Ben's also working with a number. He undertakes as well, so he's in that cemetery all the time. And so a lot of our feedback and a lot of our interest is through him. He also is engaged with cemeteries all across the region, so he knows the world that we live in. On top of that, we have Liz and our clerks who really maintain the database of the cemeteries. We're undergoing a pretty extensive digitization of those records right now, focusing right now on Rockville, because that's the simplest and easiest to start with, and then we'll jump from there. But Liz really keeps those records, and obviously the sales go through the clerk's office. And then Mike, like all things, when things really break, who do we call? We call Mike. So when we have some real issues and significant maintenance issues, for example, somewhere you may remember we had a pretty significant water inundation of a number of graves in the Seaview Cemetery a couple years ago. And Mike worked with a contractor to get that project completed, and it's dry as well, I won't use that phrase, but it's dry over there, it's working well, it's draining well for everyone's purposes, and honestly, it was a really ugly situation. It was a newer section, and so, we were doing burials in the same area where we had standing water. I mean, it's not a great situation. So anyway, in many hands make light work, and that's where we are with cemeteries. Questions?
I wondered, Megan, where are the reserve numbers, where we can see what the reserve accounts and those balances?
They are page
Page
61.
61.
Okay.
How many plots are available open to sell?
That's a Liz question.
Yeah,
Available
many?
to sell?
yeah.
How many aren't owned?
Oh,
Oh, we still have plenty left. In any particular cemetery?
Let's just talk Seaview.
Right now, with the avenues we have open, we're probably still well over 100. We have 2 avenues going right now. That's what John was referencing, that we fixed the drainage for. And then we're hoping to go more towards, if you're looking at Seaview, where the last stones you can see going out towards the road. Adding a couple more roads eventually.
Are we still closed to non-residents?
Yes, we're still closed to non-residents as of right now. I do have a waiting list, a pretty significant one. A lot of Camden residents are interested, obviously, in being in that cemetery. So I just keep maintaining that list if we should ever lift that moratorium.
What are the policy considerations with that moratorium? I mean, if it's a revenue generator, that's one
I think
piece.
we voted on it, right? The
Correct.
Select Board did
Yeah.
a few years ago, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay, before I was on.
And I think we would just need to revisit it, right? I mean, I think at the time, we just didn't have the space, right? There were a lot of work that
Right, you
had
had
to
the
be done.
drainage issues.
Yeah.
We didn't have the space, so we put that moratorium, and I think we even renewed it at least once.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we should look
last
at that, I think,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
part of revenue. If we do have a
Yes.
list and you don't have a lot of Rockport residents that are,
at this point, I have more Camden residents on the waiting list than I do Rockport residents coming in and asking to be in
Yeah.
Seaview. Typically, honestly, it's West Rockport that the Rockport residents are,
yeah.
in my 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But
That
We should
makes sense.
We should think about that.
Yeah.
And hopefully after this spring, we hope to have another new loop, so a road in and out, so 2 roads
Yeah, let's sell it
put
out.
in.
We'll talk as a select board about that later.
Yeah.
yeah,
There's another issue too. I noticed on here, there's no mention of the columbarium, for which we had collected some $30,000 or $40,000. Where is it? And that was part of the thing to release, or to allow more space in Seaview, was to put the columbarium there, and we've even been out there and picked the spot and everything, and there's nothing in here.
Yeah.
And that's that
So
reserve, right, that's
Where
on,
did the money go?
it's
Yeah,
here in the
well,
reserve.
Yeah, so there's money in the reserve, that hasn't gone anywhere. We talked with Ben, our deputy sexton, about this issue. And his belief right now is that it wouldn't be a good fit for Seaview, and it wouldn't be a good expense for the town at this point. That doesn't mean that couldn't change in the future, but that was the advice we were getting, is that it's not the right fit for where we are right now. The cost of them have gone up, and so to make them pay for themselves, it's a pretty costly endeavor. So, we have room right now. We have a lot of room, frankly, between all 3 cemeteries that we're selling lots in, between Rockville, West Rockport, and Seaview. And so there is space. Do we wish to get into that? That's another topic, but I think right now Ben's recommendation was do not proceed with a columbarium at this time.
So where did the money go?
It's in reserve.
Still right in the reserve.
Why isn't it on here so we can see it?
Because the
That's
reserve-
page
Because it's in
61.
reserve,
Yeah,
page
reserve is also
61.
on that
Okay.
page. Yep.
But,
2 reserves. Oh,
yeah, use of cemetery reserve in the budget has no money. Does that mean that we could?
cemetery reserve.
Well, there's a trust fund. I mean, on the reserve page, there's 2 cemetery trusts, reserves.
There's 38,000, give or take.
Yeah, 6723.
And on the next page is 20.
Yeah,
Oh,
so the
that
next page is just the historical information for the same ones that are on the first page.
Got it.
So it's not on.
And one thing that I want to mention is that in the last, not the existing mowing contract, but the mowing contract that came before that, town experienced an incredible increase in that mowing contract. That's right. Yeah, it was exorbitant, but it was market. Went to bid. That was the price that we got. Now we're in a new contract, so that's where the number we have here, 119,235. That's reflective of that most recent contract that we've gone up for. But effectively, this is the second contract where that number has
Wow.
leveled up
Jumped.
again.
Another 20%.
Another 20%.
Wow.
Yep.
On behalf of a former select board member, Eric Boucher, he was a big proponent of finding alternative ground covers to the cemeteries.
Yes, he was.
And I keep that alive because I think there could be some value to that, but we're not going to solve that tonight.
This one was just put out to bid, this 119.
No, this was put out to bid last spring.
After we did the budget.
Yeah. So that's why we have that variance last year.
And did we just get one bid?
We got one bid.
Yeah, so we don't exactly have a competitive market on that.
The contractor we had previously handling the mowing is not the contractor we've used presently or in this past contract. They effectively went out of business on us. Just before I came on board, it was a no-show situation. Not pretty, and certainly the last place you want to see that happen is in your cemeteries. So the cost is tremendous, but I've never had an issue saying Hey, can you get over there a little bit early? Can you deal with that? So at least in terms of service, we're getting the service, but the cost is eye-popping.
Janet?
I asked last year, excuse me, I don't remember the answer. Have we looked into, is it more economical for us to hire an employee to mow the cemeteries versus contracting the work out?
Do you want to answer that question?
Go
Mike, to
for it.
start?
Well, I would say it would be close. I mean, we have the equipment,
Yep.
we have the mowers,
Yep.
so it's.
And you look at that with the parks mowing too, which we'll get to in just a bit.
How long is this contract for?
3 years.
So we'll see what it does over 3 years.
The one thing that, and this is a debate that's as long as time, I think, exists, because they, the contractors know that what's that threshold, that tipping point, right, of when it's reached that point, and larger communities do their own mowing. That obviously creates another list of hirings and another list of equipment that you have to buy, and other, I mean, we have 2 mowers.
Right.
But that wouldn't be sufficient
would
for us
not be enough.
to do everything. Because when you talk about, this is just one portion. There's another portion, that's the parks, and another portion which is sort of our town facilities, so the town office and the like. So with, a couple years ago, when that last contract had gone out, the town manager at that point in time, not me, had decided to strip some town facilities out and add those to public works. So that's where we bought a couple mowers, and we've had our buildings and grounds crew largely handling some of those lower maintenance issue mowings. Cemeteries are very hard. That's as you sort of think about, yes, it's pastoral, it's sort of wide open, but it's also, you have a monument and a flower and a this and a that, and it's a very complicated matter. But you are getting to a point where you have 119 here and so much here and so much there, and you start to add it together. You know, I've been of the mind of contracting where you can, because you have a fixed cost and you have a fixed contract and you know what you're getting for that purpose. But you may be once again at that point. It's hard if, the other thing I want to just say is the old days of having the 16-year-old going out mowing the lawn cannot happen for the town. Anybody who's mowing the lawn for the town of Rockport has to be at least 18 years of age. They have to have training. They have to go through a great deal just to be able to do that. So, for example, the park attendants we've had down at the harbor, they aren't allowed to mow the lawn. We have to have our harbor master, deputy harbor master doing it because of that. So these are the considerations we have to throw at it.
Part of that discussion, I mean, you talked about how we've just made a decision that some things we will mow ourselves and the cemeteries are going to mow separately. Was there ever a discussion with contractors about the entire mowing, everything in town, everything that needs mowing, the town hall, like all of it? Like, does it make sense to bundle those back together into one big contract? Or are we're just gonna end up mowing it all ourselves anyway?
So the way that they did go out at the same time, and I think the contractor effectively treated them as one unit. We build them separately largely so that way you all can see them as units.
Separate units.
Yeah. But it's a little bit of an annoyance, but we somewhat created that issue where we had town service, so we're gonna do it without really a plan for the town to take that project on. And so we really were somewhat behind the 8 ball, and it was somewhat done after the budget process that year. So we really didn't really give it its best foot forward, you know?
Yep.
I think, you know, this is one of those conversations that happens in a budget committee meeting when we talk about it and we say, yeah, maybe we're at that point now. Now, there's certainly, you know, we have 1 more year of the contract, so you're to get out of that contract, there are penalties to go through that, obviously. But it may be worth saying, okay, let's, over a period of time, we build up the staff, we build up, and we create more of a seasonal workforce. That's the one thing we really haven't done, is we've really predominantly been a year-round for everything we do. And then sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's not so good. And it creates a different set of challenges for Mike or Glenn, depending upon which department we throw that in, but it may be worth looking at some more.
Well, Parks is 78.5 for the mowing contract,
Yep.
so the two together are about 200,000 in mowing.
The total mowing
We're gonna
contracts
go
for,
into business, straight up business here, mow this town.
You're hired.
I don't know if I'll pass the certificate.
You did.
I tried.
You did. Yes. What was your bid, Zach? Do you remember? 48?
41, I think.
41.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. Is there any, have we thought about like maybe shifting some of the cemeteries over to the town and contracting some of the, like the lower price?
Like trying to break out even more so than what we have here.
Yeah, so I mean, like if cemeteries are expensive and we already
Yeah.
have such staff on hand, is it better for us to allocate those resources to the cemeteries? And we can contract out some of the
Other
Yeah.
stuff?
aging properties?
Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah. That's
I
a
think
good
some of
question.
that though is that we don't actually have the staff on hand. I mean, I know we have the people, but like what we've been doing for the last couple of years is trying to get Public Works fully staffed again so that they can actually do all the road maintenance.
Yeah, like, which, I certainly understand, I know it's an issue, I'm just asking
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
question how
It's a
to.
good question.
It is. Yeah. And yeah.
And these are great, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. With Buildings and Grounds, that's who normally does our mowing, and we'll chip in and help if we have people that's available at the time. The cemeteries are pretty time consuming to do. I think we took the easiest that we could run in, get it done,
Sure.
get out, get back onto buildings.
Yeah.
So the people to go into, because,
Right.
the people we bid out to usually will roll in with 2 or 3 mowers and 2 or 3 weed whacker guys. And then, through the summer, you have those people, and then I think what John was saying, you have them through the winter, and then trying to find part-time to do that, that's a struggle.
That's the other challenge.
Are we gonna be mowing RES this year?
It's a good question. Talking with Lesher Family Foundation, it sounds like there's a groundbreaking that likely will occur in July. So some mowing, yes, there'll be t-ball, there'll be some softball, but it will be abbreviated, it seems. So
Especially for a fiscal year.
right, yeah, for a fiscal year, true, yeah. That's a very good point.
Well, these are, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask about the computer software license. I take it this is something new besides the one that Linda was developing?
Yes, we started that about a year ago. The software that was here when I came was basically, it was old.
It was brand new, it was custom made for us.
It wasn't living up to the function that we needed. This one's a little more in-depth. If you're familiar with the Find a Grave, it's pretty similar to that. It's called SemSites. So it's basically, you look right at a plot, and it will have a picture of the stone eventually. And then you click on it, and it has every correspondence, every card, bill of sale, everything to go with that plot.
This has digitized all the cards and everything that Linda had with all the
We're-
individual files.
We're inputting them. It's data entry. That's why it's taking a while, and that's why we started with Rockville, because it's so small, and it's just, you've been there, row after row. So it's easy to kind of follow as we get used to the software. And it should be, we're hoping that Rockville will be public-facing by the end of the summer.
Okay,
And then we'll move on to West Rockport.
West Rockport, okay.
One more
Yes.
quick mowing question. Do we have an estimate of how many total hours it would take us to mow cemeteries a week? I mean,
So what I'd like to, maybe on mowing, because I think this is a great discussion, and I think I've been making a list of things that the select board needs to look into based on these really good discussions, because obviously we're not going to make a decision, I don't think, in the budget context on the future of mowing, but, because I think we should get that
We should.
information.
It's a lot of money.
It is, yeah.
Tremendous amount of money.
You said it's a 3-year contract,
3 year. So this is the second of the 3 years. Yeah.
but it's not at a fixed rate each year.
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
It
it's
is,
fixed rate
okay.
each year,
So
yeah.
we're locked into.
Yep. So we'd have one more year of this. Then the 26, 27 budget will have a similar, and then.
And I didn't want to cut off if somebody has an answer to Walker's question, but I suspect that's something we're going to have to
yeah, I
look
was just
into
trying
more.
to come up with what
what it would
The
cost.
comparison would be, yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Can we issue an RFP and not follow through on it for any of the bidders? Gives us a little more time in terms of self-evaluation.
So requesting an RFP even though we have an existing
We
contract?
have a contract.
No. If we're still in limbo towards the end of the existing contract.
Which will be next, is it June
Yeah, another
2026?
27. Would be
27.
in the spring of 27, we'd be, or winter of 27, we'd be
Yeah.
back up to bid.
Okay.
So we should have time at least to evaluate it.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely, yeah. We've, year and a half almost.
Good questions.
Yep.
I
All right.
wonder, what the-
On 3641, the Graven roadway repairs, I'm assuming that's the two other roads that you're putting in at Seaview mostly, for the 50,000. Is that, what is the plan, long-term plan for that? Is that just this year? Is that gonna be another 50 grand next year, 50 after that?
We have it for this year, and I think if
And did we,
we need a couple years of it.
Yeah, so there were two, well, three different areas that were highlighted, basically.
Right.
There's a real focus on trying to get to areas, let's build up a road where we're actually selling the lots. So, for example, not to use Seaview because we've had that issue there, but a good example is West Rockport. So for anybody familiar with the West Rockport Cemetery, if you head down Park Street, there's that row of lots that run along that, the tree line there, right? Kind of at the end of the cemetery. And then, if you notice, there's no road. And so, that's, you somewhat want to lead your road to where you want people to sell your lots, because that's where you're going to have your burials, you're going to have people coming in and visiting those lots more often. And so the idea is to focus the roadway work, not haphazard or willy-nilly, but focus them on where we're selling the lots right now. Rockville is a little bit difficult because the layout of that cemetery still needs some work, and we're going to need some help from Gartley and Dorsey to find our pins and make sure we're putting roads where people aren't. But predominantly that focus, so the 50,000 here that's unspent, that's gonna go into Seaview this spring. And then the next round of 50 would really be into West Rockport and Rockville.
What about the
so
25?
the next round you're
Twenty-
saying is gonna be
yeah.
this, the 50
Sorry.
grand that is unspent that's going into Seaview was
Yeah.
last year's budgeted, 24 to
Right.
25,
but it'll
Yeah.
be spent by July 1.
this spring.
By July, right. Yeah, that's the goal.
So if we, I know we're still trying to expand, but if we have enough, sounds like a significant enough amount of lots still for sale, do we need to expand right now?
Well, it's not expansion, it's really building
Well-
roads where we're already working.
Okay.
It's kind of an unconscionable thing in my mind, in that we sold lots and we never built the roads to where we were selling them.
Okay, so this is to catch up for stuff that we've already sold.
That's the way I view it, yeah. And there are additional lots, sort of as you come back around on, like, for example, West Rockport, as you come back around, sort of you build that sort of U shape as you go out. You would have that return, and you would have another row that comes in the middle, and so forth and so on. But we never really built them out, and we haven't really adequately maintained those roads. And what I'd like to see us do is really focus on those areas we want to sell, and focus on maintaining those roads in those areas to the best we can, not trying to do everything all places, because unfortunately, we have too many roads and too much to take care of all at once. We gotta focus where we can. That's the focus right now.
But I would say, after doing this year's work, and then, if this goes through for the year after, you might be able to skip a year, as according to what we have for, I don't know that it'll be an every year
Yeah.
thing. I think
So that 50 last year was Seaview, this 50 coming up is mostly West Rockport.
West Rockport and Rockville, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so the 50 next year tentatively will be for Rockville and more of West Rockport?
Yes, yeah, so, there's 150 that we haven't spent that's in this existing
Yeah.
year's budget,
24,
not this one.
25.
24, 25, which would be
25,
Seaview.
26 will be West Rockport.
West Rockport and Rockville.
Rockville.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Any
maybe,
plans
according
for-
to Mike, that would be it for a year.
That's right.
Maybe we'd get a
We
break.
could take a year off.
What about Glen Cove? Any issues down there?
Of course, right? There's issues everywhere, Helen. Because we're not selling lots down there, I haven't,
Oh, you're not?
well, it's not, no. But that's not, I think, trying to focus on where people are going right now is really the focus in my mind. You know, I think, for those who don't know, I mean, Helen knows this world better than all of us. You know, she's forgotten more than the rest of us know about cemeteries and maintenance of monuments. There's a whole nother level here of funding which isn't in here, and she'd be right to tell us that we should be putting, you know, $50,000 aside just to maintain monuments every year, and maybe that's enough, not enough, but that's something we're not talking about here and we haven't discussed. At some point, I'd love to have that be part of what we're doing, but I don't feel that right now. But she'd be very, very much in her right to say that, because those are expensive pieces that were part of the perpetual care and maintenance of those forever. And so, it's not here, but am I fair in saying that, Helen?
Yeah, and I can drop this, the state commission may, in the coming years, be able to sponsor workshops to put upright and properly mount cemeteries for town employees or town designated people. It's part of our commission is we are supposed to educate municipalities and cemetery owners. And so we don't have any money yet. We're a line item in the budget coming up.
This all sort of also raises a question on how much we charge for lots versus what it's costing us to operate these cemeteries.
Oh, I wanted to ask.
I know, I'm not sure if I'm like crossing some line that we just take it on and we don't, but it's, especially when we're talking about non-residents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we did rewrite the book with all the amounts several years ago before a certain person deleted the cemetery committee.
Right. So it needs to be updated again, surprisingly enough.
Probably.
So, yeah, I would expect before the board were to open moratoriums, there'll be a new list for all of those, in particular for our non-residents. So, you know, I think we'll go up for everybody because every cost for everything have gone up, but those particularly non-residents who want to be in Seaview need to pay a premium
You
to
get
do so.
perpetual care, right?
So,
What's the range? What does the cemetery plot cost in the town of Rockport?
For a Rockport resident, for the smaller lots right now, they're $250 for a 4x4. That's it.
Yeah,
For a
perpetual
10 by
care.
10 for like, which are at Rockville, and
Answers itself.
they're $800. And that's huge. I mean, that's very inexpensive,
Yeah.
very
So I
inexpensive.
see a
But-
select board budget item, I mean, agenda item.
right, yeah.
Go over this.
Yeah, I'm,
Anything you look at anywhere else has been, and I go over this all the time, you're, you know, $1,300 for a resident for a 10 by 10 or, but the, you know, the 4x4, right? You know, the small ones for cremains.
The other thing is
But,
Very inexpensive.
there's also a difference cemetery to cemetery. So
Right.
how you would, your price at Seaview may not be your price at West Rockport or Rockville.
okay.
You know, so there's a variation there.
Okay, the cemeteries is getting the $50,000 road.
Yep,
How much are the plots there?
That's
Those
that's
are,
Seaview.
that's Seaview, those are $350 for a resident, for a 4x4.
And
The
how,
bigger ones, we don't sell a lot of them, so I don't know off the top of my head. Those are pretty much sold. That's the back of Seaview.
okay, so the $50,000 road is going in where the plots have already been sold.
Yes,
Some,
some
not
have.
all.
But that's why
Okay.
we want
There'll
to
be
put some
more.
roads in so we
But
can
it takes a
sell
lot
more.
of
Which were
$350
sold on the
grave
process,
sites
there'll
to
be a
pay for a
road.
$50,000.
Got that. So
Exactly.
what I'm trying to figure out is, if you put in a $50,000 road, How much did you make on the plots that are on that road?
Couple
It's
thousand,
not a lot.
couple thousand,
Yeah, a couple thousand. It doesn't make any sense.
Right,
right.
So, noted.
yeah.
We're going to we'll discuss this more in a
Well, that
different
just
context.
doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
No.
I mean,
That's right.
it is, part of it too is also still that it's a cemetery for a town, and part of a town service is to provide
Yes.
a
Cemetery
place
for
to
your
bury
residents.
someone.
Right, so for
Okay.
town residents,
So
maybe,
affordably, I agree with that.
yeah.
There's just a middle ground of,
Right.
The
no
non-resident
cemetery is
does
ever
jump
gonna
up and
break
go up.
even
No,
with a revenue stream.
that's right.
That might not be the goal. but-
Not the goal.
No, it's not a money maker. No. It's a lot, yes, yes indeed.
What if I
So one
buy
question-
some lots and then you sell them later on?
It does feel like it would be good
Something
to
like
find
that.
out exactly if there's any room in the Camden cemeteries, how much those are going for as well.
Yeah, get some
For a
compare, and
comp.
it sounds like Liz has done some looking into that,
Almost,
so.
they're almost double. I worked in
Are they?
Camden for a long
Okay.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
One question I have is on the reserve. We've got that $39,000, if I got it right. But anyway, for the columbarium, and if there's this sense that we're not going to do that, is this an opportunity tonight to take some portion of that reserve?
Yeah, I don't think we should touch that yet, because
Okay.
it's, I mean, we'll still have it there, it's not, we're always gonna be spending money from,
The problem is that money was given to the town from the Seaview Cemetery Board with the restriction that it be used for columbarium when it was accepted.
So who's the Seaview Cemetery Board?
It's non-existent, that's why they gave us the money.
Right.
So
They
how
were
do we change that?
disbanding. I
I don't, we can't do it tonight, I guess.
Cypre?
how do you
Yeah.
spell blasphemy?
Sorry, side joke, guys. You
Yeah.
don't want that.
Okay. Okay, well, I just put
it
that
on
out
the
there,
list.
because when
Put it
we're
on the
looking for
list.
money, and we have some money sitting in a reserve account that's now sort of dead, if you will.
I mean, I think the theory behind that is that some people still want a columbarium,
Okay, so we need
It's
to
a
further
and I think there's
analyze.
still a drive for that, and still a potential revenue stream, much more so than a $250 site.
Yeah. So we'll have a
Absolutely.
separate
requires
select board
And you're
discussion
getting a
on that.
columbarium that you don't have to mow.
Right,
Right,
Yeah.
true.
and the price keeps going up, so the longer you delay and delay and delay. This was
The problem,
supposed to be built several years ago.
the problem is that the cost of them alone, the lot, the niche price to make that break even, I suppose, it would be far more than what we would charge for a regular lot. So you would be paying a premium. The economics of the cemetery don't work the same way unless you have higher prices to offset that everywhere. So it's a balance that we have to consider, and if they do work under a new, fee schedule, then perhaps it could be, but right now, if you can buy a 4x4 for $400, you couldn't touch that price, that's a third to a quarter of the price of what that would be for a niche of the same size, so.
So,
Yeah.
one other question. These funds that are allocated for long-term projects, are they just sitting in a savings account? Or are they actually being invested with like something that gets a return, like a CD or something that's some sort of return?
Some of them are invested, others are sitting in our normal deposit account. Our deposit account recently has had higher interest rates than what some of our returns have been in our investments.
Okay.
As those rates start to decrease, then we'll look to move some of those deposit funds into short-term CDs or something like that.
Cool.
Okay, anything else on cemeteries? So I didn't hear any discussion of anything that we want to change or make any changes to this proposed budget for cemeteries. Okay. Thank you, Liz.
Night, Liz.
This was a good discussion. I think we got some ideas.
See you Monday.
Yeah, I'll be back Tuesday.
Tuesday, sorry, Tuesday.
Okay, moving on, we're at Now we're at Public Works, right?
Now we're at Public Works.
Okay, we've got Mike Young, that's page 225 for Public Works.
How'd you lose your?
Oh, thank you.
I think this is our single biggest budget
I
item,
think
right?
so.
For sure. Yep. This is where all the fun happens.
And we sure do like it after one of those gnarly snowstorms overnight to be able to still drive somewhere the next morning. So thank you. It's been a tough winter, and we appreciate the work you guys have done.
Very true.
Can you box that stuff?
So this is probably this is an area where the details matter, and probably it's been the single biggest area of focus over the last 4 years that I've been here, and it's largely driven, no pun intended, by the fact that we have, again, as I mentioned the other night, that we had deferred a lot of maintenance, particularly in the area of road construction, over the prior 10 years. And the cost for that are something that we're seeing every time that we open a road, every time we dig a culvert, every time that we're ditching and brush cutting. The deferral of maintenance has bitten us and bitten us and bitten us. We have, but we have been greatly appreciative of both the budget committee, the select board, and the town's response to that problem. And that problem has been one that required a pretty swift and strong statement from all of us involved to turn the tide. Deferral maintenance is just simply something that costs you more tomorrow than it did today. And we are certainly, it can be difficult to face the costs of today and say, how could it possibly be more tomorrow? But every year I get proven that maxim remains true. Whether it's the cost of asphalt, whether you want to talk about tariffs, whether you want to talk about the way that permitting occurs and the difficulty it takes to simply get a culvert or a box culvert installed, everything becomes more costly, more expensive tomorrow than it does today. So striking while the iron is hot, striking while the iron is in front of us is just, to me, is the most important thing we can do. It's the best way we can make a dollar spent today not cost us $1.25 tomorrow. And that's a real number. Those are real, that's real in my experience. So last year to this year, or what's included in this budget, and what I really want to do, probably just to give a sense of like the big picture of this budget, if you wouldn't mind maybe going to the 5-year road paving plan, which is just after your budget. I don't know what page. It's on a landscape. So you've got
232.
So you've got
232.
Okay, gotcha.
So you've got, on the top here is the proposed roads that are in this paving plan for this coming year. That's the top section here. The bottom section is sort of the runners up, the ones that missed the cut for a number of reasons. We'll talk about why. And then there's some details for each of those projects below. What I want to first highlight here is the way we come about this plan is that we take it's a simple math equation. It's a 10-year paving cycle. So that means on average, you're going to hit every road once every 10 years. That means that so to figure out how much you stay on that cycle, it's as simple as taking your total road mileage, divided it by 10, and that's how much you have to address in a given year. Now there's obviously details within that, but that's what you would do. If you look here at this top section, at the bottom of that first list of streets, this says total, and it gives you a total of 31,727. Everyone sees that.
Yeah.
That's the number of feet, linear feet, that we would be paving with the plan what's listed above, okay? Below that is the 10-year paving plan annual target. So if we were doing what a 10-year cycle would ask for, we should be paving 38,016 feet. Now, there are variances within that. Some roads are wider, some roads are narrower, some roads this and that. But just in the pure basis of paving and going straight ahead and taking a tape measure, that's how you would get to a number, okay? So we're short about 6,000, almost 300 feet of what that paving target is. So you'll say, why do you do that? Why are you doing that to us, John? Right.
Because we don't have any money.
The reason why is pretty simple, right? Because if we were to hit that number, we'd be paid, the cost would be $1.1 million, just in paving alone. Now, as for everyone who've heard me talk over the last 4 years, you know this is a very important number to me, because this is the metric that is sort of the benchmark of how we spend on infrastructure. So the fact that I'm saying we need to do less than that this year just is my sort of canary in the coal mine to say, that's why I think this budget number is so scary and why I'm trying to pull that back from the edge. So the number here for this year's paving, which is that sort of next column in bold over, $916,556. This is the fourth iteration of this list of paving, because we had one for a capital plan, we threw it out because it was too much. We got a second plan, we threw it out because it's too much. We did a third time, we threw it out because it was too much. And this is what we ended up with. These roads are pretty straightforward. They're pretty honest. I don't think it's understood what's going on here. There's only a couple I want to mention in terms of the paving side of this. One is that the largest of these roads is Main Street. So last year, we reclaimed the section of Main Street between Route 1 and Simon's Corner. So we put one coat of binder effectively down, right? It gets beaten up by the traffic over the course of the winter, the fall, the spring, and you have to put a second coat on to finish that project. So that $216,062, that's sort of the first thing that you have to consider as part of this budget in terms of priorities. The second piece is Meadow Street. Meadow Street is probably among our most busy traveled roads. It's probably in the worst condition. In particular, the section from the diner up around the corner and up to South Street. It's not to say it's great shakes beyond that, but that section in particular is in really rough shape. The initial draft of this plan had us reclaiming, just as we did on Main Street, just as we had done on Park and the other part of Meadow, that entire section of road. But that's not here because we can't afford to do it, okay? So we instead went to be a little bit more targeted in our approach, try to target the areas that really did need that reclaiming and focused on that area that we're talking about. In addition, and subsequently, the town voted and approved improvements to those stream crossings. One of those stream crossings is that spot right behind the diner, which has been a bane of the existence of our public works crew. We love, beavers were great when they were the school mascot for Rockport High School. Not so great when they were clogging up the scene over there, making things at the diner difficult. So we've sort of tweaked that project a little bit. There isn't as much that would be reclaimed as part of that. We're going to sort of fold some of that project into the stream crossing because, as you all know, it sort of dips there. And Mike can maybe describe it a little better, but we're going to have to come back from that dip and sort of bring the road up overall, which will obviously mean a smaller area that you're going to reclaim and need to repave as part of this. Does that make sense? Everyone kind of understand what I'm talking about? I realize it's conceptual, but anyway. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. I would say almost half of these items were kicked over from last year. I'll talk about why that is. But these are projects that didn't get part of last year's plan and gets kicked over into this year's. And that process has caused us to re-examine a whole bunch of things in terms of how we put together this plan. So we can talk about those specific roads, but that just to give you a ballpark in terms of what that is. So
And the
yeah.
total number, so
Yep.
the 916 is, but do you go over to the 1.168?
Perfect.
Oh,
Perfect. You do, yeah. So the 1.168 is the total of the project, the entire projects on these roads.
Trees.
Exactly right. And what we found is, and this goes back to the deferral maintenance in my mind. Everyone's familiar with Alexander Drive, off Park Street, familiar with that general area? So 3 years ago, I think it was the first major area that we had sort of started this effort. And put in the budget, okay, it's X number of feet, and this is how far we need to go, and yes, we'll ditch along the side, and there's a couple culverts, and we'll get into that. Before too long, we quite literally were digging up the road because it was in such poor condition. Found stumps, found things that we didn't know existed were gonna be in that condition. And of course, and once you open something up, you've gotta put it back. And that has been the experience, and I'll let Mike speak to it, over and over and over again. Particularly in these former subdivision roads. Not to put blame on those who only build subdivisions. Some of our builders are great, but we sometimes don't know what we have until we have it open. And so what that has done is a project, I'll give an example out of my neighborhood, Winding Way, which is the road that goes right down to Chickawaukee. We budgeted in here that paving cost, and we expected to replace 3 culverts. 8 culverts later, and about twice as long for our crew to be on that road. Not just because, and of course, they know I'm driving by every day, so it's not like they're milking that. They want to be out of there as quick as possible. That's right, yeah, no one wants to do that when the boss is going by. That project then goes, and it grows. And so what we've really focused on, and then what that means is another road gets kicked off the schedule because we can't afford. It's a finite amount of money we have to work with. So if we don't work within that amount of money, it doesn't happen. So some of these roads on here, Ashley Terrace, Bristol Drive, Robinson Drive, some of these are roads that were part of earlier projects that didn't get completed because we just ran out of time, ran out of money. So what this green area is, to Denise's question, is us taking a much harder stamp on that than we ever have to make sure we have material, make sure we have grass seed, make sure we are putting a shoulder on the edge of the road where it's needed. We were trying to be budget conscious, but really we were being penny wise and pound foolish. And so what you have here is that $251,000 that gets added to the 916 is really a representation of the trees, the signs, the grass seed, the gravel. So what we're doing now is we're looking at those projects holistically. We're looking at the whole project, not just focusing on paving. It's important, but it's not the whole enchilada. And then being able to build off of that. So the real growth in this budget is not paving, although we do expect an increase on the per ton price. Last year, we paid $103 a ton, and we're projecting $115 a ton. Now, if everything's great with the world and it's 103, we may be able to get more done. That'd be wonderful. But the world's uncertain, right? just in. So we've really spent a lot of time, and Mike has worked really hard on me throwing out these versions and him coming back to Megan and I with new versions of this. I thank him for his time in doing that. But I think this is our best effort ever in trying to put forth a real number on what these projects are. So that's why it looks a little different. I wanted to explain all that. That's the growth in this budget by and large is material. And that's some of it's growth in the cost of that material. Some of it's just us budgeting properly and what that material is.
You're realizing the actual cost.
That's right, 100%.
So, I've got a question about how you make the list here. On this, the next page where you talk about the water crossings, there's like critical, poor, below average. There's an assessment that's done. I get the idea of having every street on some type of cycle. I mean, I see, I'm on Cross Street. I see it on the list here. I didn't.
It has nothing to do with you.
No, I realize that, but I also, I mean, and don't tell my neighbors this, but I mean, I walk that street every day with the dog. It's fine. It's not great, but it's not in any kind of, I mean, it's not really, compared to Meadow Street and some of their super high traffic. Cross Street has some traffic thanks to the high school kids.
Sure
But
does,
it's,
yeah.
you know, so how do you weigh, like every road should get some type of touch-up every X years versus a Meadow Street's got a ton of traffic on it and it's in pretty bad shape. And Cross Street, again, it's nice to see it on the list, but
But could it
I
wait?
mean,
But could it wait? I mean.
yeah, I mean, it's
But that's
really
what we
not,
run
it's
into,
really
right,
not
is we
in
wait.
critical shape. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you make that judgment of, this one's okay, but this one's really a mess and there's a lot of traffic on it and we need, you know.
Just going out and driving every
Yeah.
street, you know, you're gonna do them in the fall, you're gonna do them in the spring.
Yeah.
A lot of them will change after winter, but it's just keeping an eye on every road. And to go along with what John said on the 10-year cycle, in 10 years, you can keep them so that you don't lose the road, basically. Because like you said, some of the roads, Meadow is an example. It gets to a point to put $100,000 of paving over just cracked up alligator. It's gonna last 3 years and it needs it again. So it's pretty important to keep everything on that cycle. And like you say, we shift, we put the roads, they're in roughly a spot where they, you know, time-wise, that's when you're gonna look at them, and we'll shift them around come spring. Was it 2 years ago, we had a road that was on the list, but it just, that spring just blew apart.
Park Street. It was Park Street.
We just-
Remember, and it just, we lost it. And we came to the budget meeting, we had the whole list and was like, forget the list. Park Street's in trouble and, you know, pass the hat. And I would say the one thing, so when you get into the engineering world and you talk with the engineers, they say the best way, your best investment is keeping good roads good.
Yeah.
So even if we're putting an inch on top of a good road, even though it doesn't, you know, the rest of us drive and say, that's fine. Keeping that good road intact could be worth its weight in gold almost. Right. So here's an example of that. So South Street, that first section of South Street off of Meadow, it started to crack, it started to go, and the earlier draft of this, we had it in there because we might be able to save this from being something that goes like Meadow, like the other part of South Street near the end. But, you know, all things considered, let's save that for another time. It's, yeah, and let me.
I know it's an imperfect science to say
It
this one
is.
needs, this one doesn't.
Yeah. But the other point of that I want to mention too is that part of the reason that the roads you're seeing in the top are in the top and not in the bottom. So the last version of this, there were a number of these projects that are in the bottom that were part of the top. Main Street from Simon's Corner out to the Camden Town line is one of those. Everyone's gone by the quarries there and there's that little dip in the road, right? Now, if you ask Mike what's in that dip, he's not sure. But he's got $25,000 in a line here to
dig it up and find out.
Find out, right. So I would love to be able to fix that because one of the people who loves to call me lives out there and loves to let me know. But, you know, I'm just gonna have to let my ear get pulled on a little bit longer and I can handle that. But some of those items that were more exploratory, or maybe there was more gravel or there was more culverts, I pushed those down simply because I'm trying to keep, what's more important to me is try to maintain the integrity of having a paving plan, one, and try to get those true material costs accounted for and a plan that this group all understands and agrees with, in concept at least. And then where we go next year, we build off of that incrementally, as opposed to, you know, we gotta fix the world's problems next year too. So that's what this looks like.
I think hearing your comments about Alexander Drive, the whole road acceptance policy that we have is something that, again, the select board needs to look into. Now, we don't have a ton of developers building housing developments, and I know there's a little bit of a tug and pull, but in things I've read nationwide about municipalities and road paving, most towns are bankrupt when they start really looking at what it would truly cost to keep their roads maintained. And I don't know if it's the 10-year policy, but that the amount of I mean, that's one of sort of Rockport's bête noires, is we have got so many miles of roads for the small town we are.
62 lane miles.
Yeah.
72.
72.
Yep.
So that's our challenge as a municipality, and I think one thing we can at least look at is not adding to that, particularly when we find out that maybe we were sold a bill of goods about the condition of the road that we were handed, and now we're rebuilding roads.
And I'd also add too, we're not responsible for them, but there's a responsibility that does go with Route 1, Route 17, and Route 90, that while we're not plowing, we're not maintaining them in the same way, when there's a problem, I can guarantee you Mike gets a call about them, whether it's a state road or a town road, right? And some of that is what we pay for because we live in Rockport. I can tell you in Hope, that was a different phone call, right? I'd be like, you call the state, Maine DOT, their number is, and I'm not saying you should, every mattress you see on Route 90, you should call Mike Young, but what I am saying is there's a level of care that we all want on all of our roads, and that's what we pay for, that's part of the extra of what you mean to be part of living in this community.
This is a little bit different angle on things, but we know we've got a certain amount of road maintenance. We know we've got a 10-year cycle. It's almost like a fixed cost that we know is there, and if we don't pay attention to it, it's going to cost us more. Have we ever thought of just getting a bond to cover all this and take it out of operations?
Yeah.
That was done 3 years ago?
3 years, I think.
Yeah, right before I got here, there was a significant bond, and this just did, the cost went up then too. And so a lot of the projects that were part of that bond didn't actually get completed because we ran out of money. Right, there is, the state does this, right? They will borrow money and they will include their annual maintenance as part of their annual money. Clay's like getting the shakes to even be talking about the borrowing like that. Because I know how he feels about these things. But we've been able, and Rockport's actually had a history. When I back in olden times, there was a cycle of rebuild over 17 years. Like all the roads were touched over a 17-year period from the mid to late 80s and through the 90s. We've been able to do it. We've been able to maintain it as part of our annual operations and annual operations budget. And I think we can do it. I think it's about discipline. It's about a bunch of people in this room every March swallowing hard and saying, okay, we gotta carve out that money because that's our future, and that's our future costs potentially going up. If I would say this though, if I felt like there was a jump start needed to get us ahead and get us to where we could be, I wouldn't be opposed to bringing that forward to this group. But I don't think we're there. I think we've been able to dig out of the hole we have to some degree. And the water crossings will go a long way towards that, because those are the issues that are somewhat above and beyond the average, 12-inch or 15-inch culvert or ditching or tree. Those were the ones that there's no way we could fit in this budget. And so that was sort of our attempt to somewhat take a different angle on that.
And that was the bond in November.
That was the bond in November, yeah. The one thing I would say is, we're looking, there is another level of transportation planning that we're not going through, right? We're talking through looking at streets that look exactly the same way we've used them, right? We're talking about making Main Street generally look like Main Street is, with, you know, maybe 10% a little bit better, maybe the, you know, the shoulders are better and it's easier to maintain, but it's not dramatically different. I think there are some in our community who would want more, who would want maybe, you know, even wider lanes or maybe more, you know, bike and ped, you know, ability, you know. So I want to speak to that a little bit, and I think we're working with Orion on a complete streets policy where we can look at these areas and find out where they work and where they don't. And that might be another avenue to look at something that's of a jumpstart variety. But I think by and large, it's sort of just meat and potatoes, putting our head down, and I think we're gonna be okay.
Another way to look at it too is that, I mean, before I started, they did an infrastructure bond that was primarily only paving projects, and they did it for 20 years. No road here is gonna last 20 years. So we shouldn't be bonding for things beyond what their even useful life is. And unfortunately, that's happened here in the past, and I think that that's probably something that we want to stay away from. So unless you were going to do all the roads at once and bond it for 10 years, it doesn't really, you'd be bonding essentially every year to try to stay within
And you'd have
that.
to do all the roads again in 10 years.
Right.
That's right.
And pay interest on all of it.
Correct.
Right.
And have
The
to
era
have
of
a,
cheap
like,
money
double the
is
public
over.
works.
We're
Right.
never gonna see low interest rates like we've
That's
had.
very
Right.
true, very true.
So I just have, sorry, Jeff. Go ahead. Mike, a little bit different question. I was on the planning board for over 10 years. I never saw you at a meeting when we were looking at site plans or, you know, it seems like we could have headed off a lot of these issues if you had given the planning board some actual specs for roads. They've got a couple subdivisions coming up
In the subdivisions that are being built and anything that's
right
going
now are
forward.
going to be in front of them, and, you know, we need some guidance from you that is very specific to keep this from happening again and again and again.
Yep, and I've been working with planning, those do get looked at. They didn't, 10, 15 years ago, they weren't getting looked at, but yes, they are now if they don't meet the standards or the drainage isn't.
So the
way
one
it
that's
should
coming up on the 27th, you've looked at the road plan?
I will before that.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Go ahead.
So I wanted to say, and not to necessarily be an advocate about this, but last night at the library, Doug's, the Conservation Committee, is that what, no. Anyway, okay. There was a,
Commission last night, yeah.
yeah, there was a very good program that included a segment about bicycling, and there were people that had bicycled, you know, fervently in cities much, much bigger than us, that will not bicycle, that will not ride their bicycles in Rockport, because a lot of it had to do with Route 1, but it had to do with shoulders and separation and all kinds of things like that.
It's
So,
dangerous.
yeah, yeah.
And I hear that, I hear it, and I think where we can and we can plan for it, let's talk about those things, but, you know, like, not to poke the bear, but, you know, Clay brought up a lot of good points last year about, you know, when do we invest in that type of infrastructure and when do we not? What's the priority? And I think there's a time for that conversation to happen, but by and large, I think the job that Mike's tasked with, and I feel I'm tasked with, is to maintain the policy of how we're using that road as it exists today. And if someone wants to say, hey, you know what, we're gonna change that policy, we think there should be 18 bike lanes or whatever, okay, well, let's talk about that, and we can budget for it, and we can talk about, is that wise or is that not wise? But right now, it's maintaining, we want Main Street to look like Main Street, we want Meadow to look like Meadow, except we don't want a small child to get lost in some of those potholes. That's all we're asking for, you know, and I think we can do that, so.
Can I just ask a couple of questions
Got it.
on the breakout? So on 3095, professional services engineering, it looks like it's in for 65. Does that correlate to the contracted engineering that's on the breakout that we looked at with the roads?
For the most part, those carry over unless there is an additional amount for incidental items that might come up that we don't know about.
Okay, but those for, like, if it's 59 here, that
It-
59 is included in that 65?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Same with tree work. So if tree work is over here at whatever tree work is 1118, there's, I'm assuming,
So-
additional tree work that has to occur outside of road
Correct.
repair.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and I want to talk about that too a bit, Michelle, if I can.
Okay.
Like, perfect example, Mike and I were talking today about this exact issue. Because to maintain a project, like, okay, this is what it takes to complete that project, but as we all know, things occur, right? There are blowdowns, there are, Mrs. Smith calls and says, oh, there's a dangerous tree in my yard, what do I do? That's that differential.
Okay.
I don't know that what's in here is enough to cover that always and forever.
Yeah.
But that's what we were talking a lot about today. But we need to somehow, what we're gonna be able to do with these projects and follow them on that side is to make sure our tree numbers are maybe more accurate on that. I don't wanna call it extra because it makes it seem like it's not important.
Yeah.
But those are the things that are the call outs and the work order based
Okay.
issues.
Yeah, I just didn't understand, wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
it wasn't an additional 19,000 on top of 15,000 that we've put on this other page,
No,
so,
that's-
okay.
you're right.
So just for reference, if you haven't noticed, in the header columns for the green section, there's a 4-digit number
look
in
at that.
parentheses that then correlate to the expense line that it's
Perfect.
in.
Thank you. And then the only other thing I had, and maybe that's buildings and grounds. I was just wondering about the library parking. We have 80,000.
Yeah, I had a question about that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, go ahead, John.
No, well, go ahead, ask the question. She started, you asked the question, then we'll, between Ben and Mike and I, we'll give you good answers.
There's 40,000 in revenue, is that from the foundation?
From the foundation and the library committee.
Okay, because I was wondering if we could,
Can you call out the line or
Please.
It's
revenue.
7607 is the
what
expense.
page?
On 230, page 230.
76,
The
okay.
40,000 is on
Revenues.
revenues on 231.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And the other, I mean, to me, that's a perfect place for the foundation to step in, because that was in the original plan for the library, and so it's not asking a lot from the foundation.
No, and the
to-
foundation has already volunteered. This is both the library committee and the foundation have come forward with those amounts approved among. so it's
Can we ask them for a little more?
Well, I mean, this is labeled as library parking here. I think I would make the pitch that it's really downtown parking. Our restaurants, our downtown area, if you're here on a Friday or Saturday night, every parking place gets used. So to add additional parking up by the library will be tremendously useful for the rest of downtown, for the businesses who pay their personal property tax. I mean, we generate revenue from our downtown businesses. So providing parking is.
So this is
actually
new,
more
this is
interesting.
new parking?
This is new parking.
Additional parking, okay.
Yeah, these are the 7 spaces that were originally to be part of the library plan. And I think much to the dismay of people who have to actually drive and park to visit the library, they were pulled out at the 11th hour.
$80,000 for 7 parking
Yeah.
spaces?
No.
Where are they?
Right on the park.
Right, so as you move up the hill on Lime Rock Street, if you were to put 7 spaces right next to the 7 that are there, they'd be right next to them.
They were part of the original plan.
That's right.
But they're not there now.
They're not there now, right.
Or won't be.
And so let me try to answer some questions and then we can get into some more and Ben's here and Mike's here. So, ever since, let's just call this what it is. Ever since I got here, which is basically when the library opened, those spots have been full. They remain full. People are using that library. They're using other parts of the downtown, but they're using the library. When we were having the select boards meetings there, those spaces were full and the downtown spaces were full. In addition, we've had a number of issues with drainage through the park, behind the properties that are along Lime Rock Street and Union Street. There's some drainage issues that are in between those 2 areas. In fact, we had one incredible rainstorm a couple summers ago which basically washed out all of the mulch that was laid like 2 weeks before. So we need to find a better way to, one, capture that water. We need a better place to put our snow. We need a better place to be able to catch ice and collect that as we're sort of cleaning up snowstorms in that area. And oh, by the way, we need places for people who want to go to the library to park. So this has been discussed for the last 4 years. It is a project that I think we've talked about numerous times with different contractors, Mike has, and working with the foundation, and this is a collaboration, and I think that's the effort here, is to try to use as many hands as possible to solve this problem. So it's a drainage issue. It's a little bit of sidewalk, but not a lot. It's 7 spaces. But there's a catch basin at the top of the hill. There's a catch basin in the park. There's piping that has to connect those two. And so we've set a budget for that project of $80,000. Mike's gotten quotes. He needs to go back and make sure everything that he wants is in that quote. We think that number can be less than $80,000, but I don't really want to suggest that we reduce that number tonight, because I don't think we have enough information. If we do have that information, say by the time the budget committee meets or the select board meets, that would be great, so we can make that change. But that's sort of the number we've been working with as a ballpark to start.
That's for the whole project?
For the whole project.
Drainage, sidewalk repairs, all that stuff?
You can pay somebody to valet park the cars, to sit out there and drive them and park them someplace else.
They have to do it for trips only.
So,
Does all the drainage and everything have to do with these parking spaces? Is that why it's
No.
part of the, okay, why is it part of the library?
Why is it part of this project?
Yeah.
Because
Nowhere else
invariably
to
to deal
put
with the
it?
water, you have to deal with both parts of the problem, both what's coming
Okay.
down the road and what's coming down in behind. And when you're working in the middle of those two, it makes sense to have the pipe connect those two catch basins, largely. That Mike can have a better answer than that, but that's my rudimentary
Yeah, no, this is the
answer.
time to do it while we're in the parking lot, rather than dig something up a couple more years when we, if we did something up the road.
It's kind of the same reason that we stagger our road improvement stuff to go with water and sewer that we know is coming up. We'll put it off and then do it all at once, because it makes a ton of sense.
are we done with the library parking conversation? I'd like to, yeah, just,
And cut off easy.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Somebody's got something?
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Different part of this conversation, Mike. Just curious, somewhere in the narrative up front, we mentioned that we've had less snow but more ice, which meant you had to buy more sand and salt.
We've gone through a lot of sand this year.
Okay, it didn't look like that in the budget, but, or in the year-to-date, but it's only, salt's only 16,000 against the budget of 77.
So salt
Oh, I'm
invoices
sorry,
lag, no, you're right, salt invoices lag about a month. And so this would have been as of November, so we wouldn't have had a lot of storms by then. And we've had a ton of storms since the end of December.
Okay, so,
Yeah, our salt shed is probably, sand basically is down more than it's been in the last like 6 years.
so is it pretty much cost us the same?
When you're plowing with it versus just sanding.
So is the savings, is there any savings in that's in here, that's factored into these numbers?
No, I guess I don't really now have I think at the end of the year, labor-wise, it comes out pretty close to the same. I mean, if we get storms where we start spending the night, you're gonna have, a lot more labor. But it is a little less labor, but I guess in the reflection, there isn't, I don't know that we're carving out labor-wise for plowing.
No. Right.
At the end of the year, I think we, what our budget is for for sanding, I think we'll be safe. We are down a lot. We use more sand than salt. A lot of ice storms will put down, more sand than salt because you're just basically wasting salt to throw it on ice when it's cold and raining and just building up.
Yeah.
So we do use more sand.
So the increase in sand and salt might even make the less wear and tear on the vehicle. It basically comes out as a wash. You're just paying it over here, you're not paying it over there.
Yes.
Can we sweep out our driveways and bring it back to you?
It doesn't work very well the second time around.
Yeah, or just, I can get it out of my front yard on the boulevard, all
Right.
the washes off there. So my next question really is sort of a higher level question of measures for, the effectiveness of public works. I mean, how do you guys know if you're doing a good job, better job than last year, other than this budget? Are there ways for you to assess yourself in quantifiable terms?
Well, I think by the amount of complaints is a pretty good answer of how we're doing.
So do you count? Do you keep track of that?
We don't particularly keep count because we don't get I'm there pretty much. I mean, there's times through the night that I try to get some sleep, but for the most part, you're on the storm. You're making decisions of what the weather's doing at the time and the temperature, and what's the safest time to go out for traffic. So every storm is different.
Have you ever seen a Public Works that had a measure of, customer satisfaction or anything like that?
I
Doesn't
would
exist?
say no. No.
Okay. I'm not questioning the work you're doing. I'm just wondering if you ever have a way to-
No, for plowing, we get a lot of compliments and very rarely, I mean, John would hear them. We don't get many complaints and we try to keep it, so we're not wasting money, but we're keeping the roads safe.
17 years I've done this, John. The 4 I've been here have been the quietest about road maintenance. Hope and Newcastle, not quite as quiet. They would let you know. I think we have a really conscientious crew. And the one thing I want to also say that's occurred is that we had a lot of our longtime employees depart over the last couple of years. So we've had almost an entirely new crew take over. And we haven't seen really a drop in, I mean, there'll be one storm, hey, they missed this spot or they did this. But there's a really conscientious group of people. Younger crew now, was an older crew before. And, things get, Walker, he had a little issue over at his neighborhood. But it's about customer service. It's about picking up the phone and talking to somebody, hey, what do we do? How do we fix this issue? I think, there can be that sort of the guy in the plow and what's he doing to me. We try not to leave that attitude and be human about that. And that's something that Mike's really good at, about making those connections with folks and making sure, hearing them out and trying to find a way to solve their solution or the problems when they have them. So far, it's working out well, but one thing we've been trying to do, and these performance measures on the first page of this area, we sort of redid those this year. So you can see there's not a lot of historical change in that. But, there are numbers, there are metrics you can use to talk about the production of that department. And so we've tried to add quite a bit to that list this year because this is the product. It's not just plowing, it's not just paving, it's a really varied world that Public Works is in. So hopefully, as we're sort of tracking some of these numbers here below over the next few years, you'll get to see sort of that rise.
One question.
Well, again, Mike, I'm very happy with the work.
Yeah, no,
So it's just really almost to your advantage to be able to kind of track it year over year and show that there's an actual way to quantify the increase in quality and how your crew's working more efficiently and that sort of thing.
EMS calls could be one of them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Janet,
I
you
want
wanna
to
ask?
can I ask a quick question, Megan?
Yeah, Janet was going to say something.
Oh, sorry,
Go ahead,
sorry,
you
sorry.
go ahead,
Um,
I can wait.
Just on the year-to-date, did you say the year-to-date numbers, like for the sanding stuff, was as of November?
So
I
like
hear-
salt
Yeah,
invoices, they bill us monthly, so those are essentially behind a month because we would have gotten the December bills in January.
Okay.
So really that sand salt is our like startup and then any usage we had in November, which
Okay.
would have been slim to none.
Okay.
So
I
then
was assuming
it
it'd be
lags.
till February or something
No,
like
we
that.
had all
but
those
okay.
storms in February, so that
Okay.
number, I'm
So
sure
these
is.
numbers, okay.
I'm sure that's
We had a
gone.
1 month winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's your cue. Thank you.
5347, road construction material. Okay, we've never spent money there before, but we're going to now.
It's a new line.
Is that in addition to the grass seed and everything that's over here in the green section?
So the 5347 is a combined of the grass seed, the filter fabric, the signs, the hay, all of that in that green column for that references back to that 16.4.
So is that 5345 that's just above it, that gravel,
Same deal.
that's all in the green section on the paving
Correct.
schedule?
Maybe this, Megan, I'm sure already knows this. I summed up every category here that looked like related to road construction and came to 1.2 million, which is roughly in line with, I think, what's on the paving plan, right? With a little excess for the.
Right, there are some that are slightly higher than what's on the thing for incidentals that we just can't account for.
And just listing those out, like John said earlier, that's just showing a real number. And when you start looking at that real number, when you take those out, if it's just in the paving line, then you start losing a road, 2 roads, 3 roads that's not getting paved because it's spending materials.
Yeah. Helen?
Yeah. Couple of questions, not necessarily about the budget. When are you going to start filling some of the potholes? It's
As we
getting
speak.
it's getting to be dangerous to getting off of Route 1 onto Pascal.
Yesterday we were out, and we'll be out the next sunny day. It's hard to do.
That's DOT.
And the other
Call
question.
DOT.
I've noticed, I don't know if this is just a general policy in this area, but why are when you repave a road, why aren't the storm drains raised? Anywhere else I've lived, they raise the storm drains so you don't go thunk. And it's getting to be sort of dodgy, trying to go down the street, and he's dodging his holes and I'm dodging my drain, and it's.
If you're riding a bike, it's a killer.
Yeah. So, is that something that's just isn't done around here?
It is. We try to do it every time. Sometimes they'll come out better than others. There's a couple ways to do it. There's a way that's cheaper and you try to get by with that so you're not spending a whole lot of money because you end up cutting the road back out after the first road and 9 times out of 10 you can hit them pretty good, but sometimes when they do it with the actual risers, you do get some that are
Yeah,
will end up
can't,
lower.
I must confess though, going down Union Street, Camden is worse. They've got some that have to be at least 3 or 4 inches, where yours are only a couple of inches.
At least in Camden, they paved the lines around one.
Yes.
That's
I noticed that.
Yes, yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
Just a quick question about, I know according to this, you've got to employ a full-time mechanic to work on all the gear. This may go back to the mowing conversation and when we make a decision to contract some of that versus have somebody on staff to do it. I know we've got police cruisers and fire trucks and we've got a lot of gear that needs mechanic work. Is there a unified approach on this? Is it only these guys get mechanics? Like, how are we thinking about keeping this stuff up? And if we looked at contracting it versus keeping people in-house, where you have to maintain a shop and lifts and gear and equipment and buildings and all of that to do the maintenance?
Great question. Great question. The answer is yes. I'll answer part of it. So over the last couple years in particular, so the mechanic position, there's been a mechanic not in name for years.
Right. Sort of assigned that role.
Right.
Fix it.
Right. Jimmy, all this was, he could fix anything, still can't fix anything. He departs, we have a new contract, we built it into our union contract to keep that position. We have, Kevin, who's been with us for years and years, kind of stepped into that spot. And yeah, right, while there's plenty of equipment to maintain at Public Works, there's fire trucks, so the lift that we have had, original to the building.
Yes.
35 years later, not actually, or more actually, I think 38 years later actually, borrowed time. It was time to replace it.
Yeah.
And it was designed to pick up like vehicles with frames, not unibodies.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we have been working through the completion of that. So that was in a prior budget. I signed the purchase order today, I think, for the purchase of that. Yep. Tire changer as well. So we're trying to improve our, one, have a safe operation, but two, to also start to branch that out. So our police department, our fire department, to utilize that mechanic in a much broader sense. You know, we haven't had, until the last few years, we've been relatively small in terms of our fleet, but now, we have a buildings and grounds, so there's ample opportunity for that. And we've actually, our mechanic we're gonna pursue further, maybe you talk about that in terms of
Inspection license. We're gonna be, working on getting the building certified, mechanic certified.
So we're not,
Exactly.
we're not, moving vehicles constantly to get inspection stickers. We'll do them right in-house. So yes, we are working on
That'll
that.
save us
Brian.
$7 a sticker.
That's right.
9 or 11 or whatever it is.
75 for a commercial.
Well, yeah.
Well, more than that in the time of scheduling and
Oh,
getting
yeah,
in there.
That's the real, and that's
That's the kicker.
and you'll see, I think in the budget, in our year-to-dates, our supply costs on the vehicle side are up and higher than we anticipated. Our contracted is down. It's working, but it's, it's sort of, we budgeted for it last year, not sure how that was going to work. So we've sort of angled more into it with what we proposed here, but again, we're feeling it out. We're trying to move in that way, but anytime we can save whatever that hourly rate is for, Key or anybody else to be doing it, we're ahead of it.
Are we responsible for the maintenance of the leased vehicles?
Yeah.
No.
They're termed lease in sense, but they're not like, if you leased a car, it's not the same concept.
Anything special about the ambulance with respect to the maintenance?
Well, not that I'm aware of. I mean,
We
there's
don't have to go to the dealer, the ambulance dealer.
I think it depends upon what it is. I know our loaner ambulance got some TLC from a gentleman a few seats down from you that we didn't anticipate, which will help us get a better deal on said loaner ambulance. But I can't say, thank you, Carl.
No sweat.
Yeah, Beach Hill Motors is up and running. Yeah, I can't say specific. I mean, obviously that's a new world for us as well, but it's a new brand spanking vehicle, so.
I have a quick question. I actually raised this 6 years ago when I was on the select board, and we'll see how people feel today.
Yeah.
But I have a sense that we overplow our roads. We're Maine. I sometimes see the plows driving down the road, and the road is already bare, but they're dragging the cutting edges, and I was told sort of at the time that Rockport has a black roads policy, meaning that, no snow on it, black road. And when you add in just the time, but then you get the overtime, because frequently a lot goes on at night, things like that. It's just hard to believe we couldn't be a little bit more thoughtful about when the plows roll.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's always a challenge, because anytime you say do less than, now you're asking the question, what's the right amount of what that less than is.
0.
And then, well, right, that's the right.
Do we need to plow if there's a half-inch of snow?
I mean, judging by the amount of calls that we go to with people off the road,
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Maybe.
pay for it one way or the other.
Right.
And I would argue probably, and Mike gets flack from this from his guys at times, that he calls too late. And, you know, they're coming in from Union, or they're coming in from Appleton, or they're coming in from Washington, and they're coming in through 3 inches of snow, and we might be at 1.5 inches, but by the time they gear up and they're loaded and they're ready to go, there might be 3. I think the timing is important, and I would say, you know, there are times, and Mike can speak to this and better than I can, but there are certainly times when, you know, you could talk about maybe how you go through that, making your decision.
Yeah.
In terms of when guys come out. I think that's important because I'm just saying that's the key, right? Is what is it we're trying to prevent? And it's largely school, it's morning traffic and it's school traffic. That's our focus. So.
I'll try again in 6 years.
Listen, I'll complain about a lot, but having my roads clear, I won't complain about. I know it's expensive, but I know you guys work hard on that.
I had a question about engineering costs, and I know we have had projects and we haven't been able to get the engineering stuff done related to this road work. We've got about $65,000 of engineering costs here. I think there's even more. I know from my personal experience on the wastewater side, we're off trying to negotiate a wastewater agreement with no wastewater engineer help. I know there's 2 different kinds of engineers potentially, but I think it, again, sort of thinking not for the budget, but something that we should examine is whether we should have some in-house engineering help, because that's been a big bottleneck for us in terms of our town projects. And I don't know who's out there, I don't know what level of expertise we need, whether we need a full-time, whether that's part-time help, but we have spent a lot of money on engineering services.
Yeah.
And yet we still don't have in-house expertise that we can go to when we really have issues that would help us represent the town. So,
Yeah, and just to answer that, I think, you know, when you're looking at $30,000, basically an instance, right? Anytime you have an issue, it's $30,000. It doesn't take very many instances before you start talking about kind of the same, kind of the inverse of the cemetery side of it. It's, you know, you get their number pretty quick. You know, we've been served, you know, by Gartley and Dorsey for many, many years. The local firm who has been there and served us. The environment does change though, and you know, we've been, you know, some of these matters with FEMA, some of these matters with other agencies, Army Corps, you know, working through these varied projects where we're involving engineers, whether it's the Harbor Strategic Plan or it's the VPI study. There's a role that many municipalities have for engineering support in-house, and it's not an uncommon thing. So, you know, that thought has crossed my mind. Again, that's another one of those things where if this were a different summary number at the end of the page, you might have something that looks a little different here in terms of
well,
budgeting,
it would only be in the guise of it could save us money.
Right.
Right.
I was under the impression that Gartley was sort of under a retainer with us already. No, just fee for service. Okay.
No, and I think it's been more a reflection of when we have a problem, when we call, they're there.
Yeah, sure.
They always show up.
Yeah.
We'll call Will.
Yeah, and this is no knock on Gartley and Dorsey.
Right.
No.
We have been having the discussion of how that can help Public Works, how it can help wastewater, how it can help planning development.
Yeah. Mike, while you're still here, you guys are gonna keep plowing my driveway, right?
No, you're off the list.
Hey, we're gonna plow it in. We're gonna plow it in.
Yeah.
We're gonna dump the snow from my yard in your driveway.
Right. Hey,
You know,
mailbox.
those grades stay VIP. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Why do we have those?
Great question. So let's just say, for example,
Down at the bottom.
not that this has happened,
no, 41,
but let's just
24.
say that
41, 22.
Mrs. Smith calls me or Mr. Smith calls me and says, your plow just hit my mailbox and this is what happened, blah, 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 blah.
Hit my
Okay.
car, hit my.
I could say, who is it? Okay, what time was it? Whatever. I can actually use that service. I can call up a video, I can call up the GPS, I can call up what speed they're going, I can find out who, what, where, when, and why. I can take the video, Mike and I can look at it, and I can say, what do you think? Yep. And that's, so, and we can even send it to the person in question if need be.
It's an
So
insurance policy.
It's an insurance policy, yeah, and it's also, it's, you know, it can be as simple as an air tag on a trailer too, that it's sort of all
Yeah, I
encompassing.
get it.
But in the trucks, it's to that level, yeah.
I think some of that, though, we might be able to use maybe for inward look more so, for possible misuse of the vehicle, just
Well, that
from
too.
here and around town. I mean, how many times have we heard trucks out in Warren, trucks over in Camden, trucks,
Yeah.
I was coming back this winter, saw a truck in Waldeboro, a Rockport town truck with a plow and sander on, turning it onto a side street in Waldeboro. That probably doesn't need to be happening, and it might be some misuse. I mean, there's trucks over my way all the time over in Warren where I'm working. So it's, I mean, at some point, we also need to think how that's gonna play into fuel savings, cause that town
Yeah.
truck is burning town fuel,
Yeah.
and it's diesel, and it's just a pickup burning diesel, which is gonna need injectors and a fuel pump, which is 10 grand after 100,000 miles. So, if we're putting 40,000 miles on a vehicle in a year, how many of those miles are work miles, and how many of those miles are maybe miles that we don't need to spend on? I mean,
What are
driving
we
back and
doing
forth
with
to
the
job
data?
sites, do we need to commute better?
Well, so let's talk about that. So the only employees that are taking vehicles home are department heads. So if a vehicle is in, if a fire truck's in Lincolnville, it should be there. If a public works truck is in Warren, it probably should be there because that's where Mike lives. He does, you know, there are, let's see, who else? Andy, our wastewater superintendent, he brings his truck home to Warren as well. So there are reasons that vehicles go out of town because that's where they live. I think that, you know, there's certainly a conversation to be had about, do you want to have your department heads able to respond, or do you want them to go to the shop to pick up a truck to then go where they got to go? You know, the line of that has been department heads sort of have that decision making. If there is misuse, that's
I
when
think
it
it's
comes
just-
to me, and that's when you sort of get into this of like, well, why are we in, you know, Acapulco with your, you know, fire truck? I don't know. I don't know if you can drive
think
the
you
fire
can do
truck.
that.
Shop all day.
Point being,
Yeah.
yeah,
Point being is when I come to the end of my driveway in Warren
yeah,
daily and see town trucks going by, Rockport, town trucks going by daily in Warren,
Right.
midday at lunch,
right.
Makes you
I'm
wonder.
just finding that hard to believe.
Well,
But they can be tracked, right?
right.
Yeah.
You
and-
need to look into
Right,
it.
we have the data,
Exactly.
but what do we do with it? Do we use it for that?
Look into it.
Is it
We-
for
Well, yeah,
spending?
it is a performance management tool as
Right.
well. I mean, UPS, all their trucks are tagged, and they can
Mhm.
figure out how many right turns that these guys take, and they should only take this many, you know. So you can do that kind of stuff.
I mean,
with
have
it.
we
Again,
been-
that's a manpower thing to spend time
Yeah.
looking at the data and figuring out what you.
Yeah, with all these trucks, have we been getting complaints and
Do we check into it?
have we been looking into
There's,
it?
yeah, so I can see where everyone is, and there is, thus far, I haven't found anybody in a place that I don't know about someone else being. So if someone is at home, or if someone's at lunch, or someone's at, you know, whatever, I have yet to see somebody who isn't someplace they should be. If there is, I can't tell this group anyway, because it's a personnel matter, and that's for me to deal with an employee. But in terms of the cost, in terms of what that is, if it was a bottom line cost, I'd deal with it before you even see it. So,
Reserves. I see we have a winter road reserve, and a
Yep.
couple years ago, we used $15,000 out of it. What is the purpose? We have 22,000 in that reserve.
What line are you
Can you
on?
call that out to Denise?
It's R0914. That was the use of it.
Yeah, that's the revenues.
So what we do, if there's money left at the end of the fiscal year in, say, salt or winter sand, we'll basically encumber that into the reserve to use in a year probably such as like this one, where we've used more salt or sand than anticipated
That's
to
what I was
offset
wondering.
those unexpected expenses.
So we could take some of that reserve and put it in this budget.
What we'll probably do is take some of that reserve and offset our excess expenses in our current operating fiscal year.
Okay. So we as the select board and budget committee can't take that money. I mean, you've got other.
I mean, you could, but then that's just a
She'll have to back that up from
shortfall
someplace
of,
else.
right.
Yeah, she's just gonna grab it somewhere
Yeah.
else. in the
Right.
budget.
So it will get used.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Are there any other reserves? Because when I look through all the public, so there's a road construction reserve, 144,000.
That will be used, you'll see the year-to-date number for paving this year is in excess of what was budgeted, so that will be used to offset that
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
There were carryover projects from the prior year.
Right.
Okay.
I think, speaking of reserves too, I think at some point we need to start maybe having, or using the equipment reserve maybe a little more prominently. If we've got how many vehicles in Public Works? We know we're gonna be replacing them, we've got a whole replacement schedule, but yet we've gotta, lease them, which is a payment with interest every time. So we know without a doubt we're gonna be buying a vehicle. So I'm not sure why we have to lease them instead of build a reserve up first and then pay for them in cash and save. I know the interest rate is low, but if we're adding up,
Well, not what it used to be.
what are we paying in interest per year on our leased vehicles? You know what I mean? Even if it's a few percent, 4% on average, it's gotta be 20 grand.
The way vehicle replacement reserve and the fire department vehicle replacement reserve, the way they've worked is essentially trying to keep our net investment steady. So there aren't influxes in the net budget number in relation to equipment or vehicles that are being replaced. So when you look at the replacement schedule, which is on page 234, there's a line at the bottom of it that says annual reserve deposit. Some years it's a negative number, and some years it's a positive number. Essentially trying to keep that initial net investment between $400,000 and $415,000. The reserve does grow larger towards the end of it because we will have to replace the Oshkosh, the one four-wheel drive big plow truck that we have. So it's growing in anticipation of having to replace that.
But even still, those are only growing, that's only growing at the rate to replace one truck, and even still, we have to be replacing all the other trucks, and instead of replacing all those other trucks with continued lease payments, at some point we should get ahead on that, so we don't have to pay lease payments every time. We can just buy the vehicle outright instead of pay the interest on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure many people would disagree with you, but, again, where are we gonna take that money out each year from?
At some point, we gotta, if we front load it a little bit, I know it might hurt a little bit, but if we are putting some in now, in 10 years, which is what most of our turnover rates are, I'm assuming, our replacements are probably even less than that, then that's when we'll start to feel our budget drop, because we're taking out the lease
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
I just think we should be using reserves in most every department a lot more effectively than what we are.
And when did we start leasing instead of buying outright? I don't remember.
It's a lease purchase agreement, so that's,
Oh, okay.
in order to do a tax exempt agreement, it either has to be a bond agreement or a tax exempt lease agreement. It's technically a loan that you would get if you went out and bought a car. It's just the way that they term it so that it's tax exempt to us.
But we don't have to give the vehicle back.
Correct.
That applies to all of these?
Correct.
But I mean, what's, I haven't even added up all our annual payments. That's gotta be what, through 300 grand?
Yeah, 301.
Wherever you got that number, you're quick.
Right at the top of the section.
I'm not that quick. I'm not that quick, but thank you, but that's really too kind.
But I mean, what's our average interest rate on that, you know?
Anywhere from 2% for some of the ones that we've had longer to the one that we just issued for the excavator, I think was 4.75, 5.25, something like that.
So even at 4%, let's say if we average 4%, which the next few aren't gonna be that.
Right.
That's 12 grand a year right there, right? That's a parking spot.
Well, if you're getting, but if you're getting 4% on your money.
What 40 feet is a sidewalk?
How many inches of sidewalk?
That was last year, this year's a
Oh,
parking
we're moving
spot.
on. Yeah.
Well, but there's also a question about, like, going back to the earlier discussion about the garage, and do we take on the responsibility for having a mechanic and a professional mechanic or a professional shop? In which case, driving some of this older stuff probably makes more sense. And trying to get more, you know, get a
Yeah.
longer sort of service life out of these vehicles.
Yep.
If we have the capability ourselves to repair it,
Yeah.
then it probably makes sense to.
So
Well,
typically what we do in terms of the replacement is like our 550s, we do a purchase agreement typically for 6 years. We keep it as a frontline truck for 10 years. And then that truck gets replaced in the sense that it moves to a secondary truck should our primary truck break down. And then we replace that 10-year-old truck with a new primary truck and get rid of whatever the prior secondary truck was to that.
I mean, to do what, and I hear what you're saying, Clay. I think to do that though, you would almost have to have two budgets working in parallel, right? You'd have to have one where you're building a reserve at the same time you're paying down whatever's left in that reserve.
In order to pay cash.
Yeah, and you'd have to, so, you know, for us to get to a point where we're on the same schedule, you'd have one where you'd pay that amount with the 12,000, right? And then you'd have, you know, less 12,000, so you'd be at 600 something. To eventually, in 10 years, be at a point where you could then say, okay, now we're just paying out cash for what our purchases are, right?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be that much, but yes, I agree
I
with
mean,
that.
all right, I'm just totally back of the napkin, but.
And if the cost of the money isn't all that different from what our residents can earn on their own money markets, we're effectively getting a loan from our taxpayers to be able to do that. So we sort of have to
Right.
balance.
I mean, theoretically, our town residents are not all in money market accounts and are probably making more like an 8% long-term in the stock market, say. But, I mean, I agree with the principle, but I think that's the argument in my book for leasing is you get to defer the tax pay, you know, from our town residents.
Oh, good discussions. Anything else on public works?
I mean, if we're going with that, at some point, we ought to just be borrowing money ourselves and investing it. If we can borrow it at 4% on a lease, we ought to be investing it and getting 8% on it, which no one in the right mind would actually do.
I think some towns have tried that, but it has not ended well.
I think it's a hard sell to the residents, I think, that Rockport's going to become your
Bank.
financial advisor.
Yes. Become your bank.
So
The
we'll invest your
Rockport
money
Fund.
for you, just give us more
give
in
it to
taxes.
us. That's right.
You can trust us.
Just one other thing, it might for the future, it might be helpful to have like a vehicle inventory, just for us to get a sense of like, okay,
Sure.
what do we have that's leased, what do we have that's old, what do we have, like, that might help us give a better sense of, all right, what are we looking at here in terms of replacements? Because it's, I think this is worth talking about, I just don't have, we have the leased vehicles on here, but I don't know what else we've got, or how old it is.
On page 319.
Of course she does.
It's Megan.
I mean, some of it, like you said too, is stuff outside of our lease payments, which is hard.
Yeah, right.
When we get to wanting to buy more equipment, you know, maybe we can make somewhat smarter decisions. I know we dropped the rental. Would we drop our rental line
Yeah,
in here this year, but,
because the excavator, that's, we
Yeah.
bought the excavator, that's why.
well, sure, the excavator and,
Yeah.
but like, you know, the hammer, we got a hammer this year, right? How much
Yeah.
did that hammer cost? That must have been 25 grand.
Yeah,
Which, how many times in the last 5 years have we used a hammer?
we would've used it a lot last spring on Main Street, at Simon's Corner. That's largely, we're like, why do we not have this, was really what drove that. Rockport, you know, the whole thing. It's, yeah, that was predominantly what drove that purchase, was that issue, where working in that spot, we needed to be able to hammer, we didn't have it. Yeah.
So on pages 318 and 319, it essentially outlines the debt that we have currently committed and outstanding. There are some additional debt payments proposed in this budget when we get to the actual debt section, but any lease agreements that we have are listed here.
And in terms of equipment, I don't want it to get glossed over. Mike did request the replacement of the backhoe that he has right now in loader. I cut that, so that's something that Mike felt he needed. I said no. And so you're gonna likely see that next year, as part of his request. That didn't go away, but just in terms of where we are and where we're headed, that'll be coming at you probably next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think though, as the price, price of a loader has gone up probably 30% in the last 3 years, if not more. As prices go up, maybe we need to be stretching the life of these out, because they're also arguably built to last longer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not arguing about that. I'm just, in terms of request,
I
that's
think it is
all.
important to try and,
Yeah.
On the outstanding debt, can I ask Megan a question? I just noticed that we still have $135,000 we owe on the street lights. But I thought when we got rid of Central Maine for that and bought our own street lights, that, you know, we would be paid off in like 3 years or 4 years.
7.
No.
7.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So how far into it are we now? 4?
It will end the next fiscal year.
Oh, okay.
Is our last payment 26, 27.
Okay.
We're getting there, Doug, we're getting there.
Time
You're
is
selling
usually one way.
streetlights.
That's right.
I know, that was one of the
Bought
best
and
things we
paid.
did.
It was, yeah, it's a good idea.
You haven't made them turn colors yet.
Yeah,
You can do that.
Sure.
John might have that ability, I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on Public Works?
I think I have one question that
Okay,
I've
Zach.
been debating on asking, and it's about wages, unfortunately. Looking over it, I just see a huge increase, and not the year over year, but
Yep.
in 21, 22, we're at 499,000. This year, we're up over 7 to 36.
Yep.
I assume we've added personnel. Either it's the mechanic.
So, we had one heavy equipment operator that was added in last year's budget.
Okay, so we're seeing an increase in $240,000 over 4 years.
Yep.
Like, what's changed in the needs of the town in 4 years that's warranted that?
Nothing, the union contract necessitated it. So we had a union contract that hit at the start of fiscal year '24, and there was a sizable increase in wages at that time. So it's about market, it was about paying people what the market was paying people with that level of skill. And, at that same time, we had, UPS had signs out of like $45 an hour or something crazy. And so that's what that that 23, 24 is the first year of that union contract. This is the last year of that existing contract. Sure. The difference, obviously now, I don't want to say now, but let's say January, and we all look into our crystal balls. I don't foresee we're going to see the same wage environment then as we saw in 23. Right. So I'm expecting we're going to see a much more modest change there to that number. Not at all what we saw here. But that's what it was.
Part about why did we have to hire one more person if the needs hadn't changed? Like, where did that come from?
Oh, well, in terms of the needs are really about road construction. And what we found is that so here's what happens, right? We plow all winter long. And when we have between Mike, 2 crew leaders, and our heavy equipment operators, that's every plow route that we have in the town of Rockport. Okay? No one can be sick, no one can have COVID, no one can have a heart attack, no one can do anything. You got to show up to work, right? So everyone who takes those jobs understands you're not going with your buddy ice fishing on this weekend. It's Christmas, but you're going to come out and plow. That's part of the gig. That's what part of winters are in working for Rockport. Now, conversely, you're still accruing PTO. You're still having, things that are going on. You still have comp time that you can accrue. So the time when you're using that, obviously, is spring, summer, fall. Well, the beautiful part about spring, summer, and fall is that's when we actually get our road construction done. So how do we maintain 2 crews working in 2 different spots at the same time with enough people to flag, enough people to run the truck, and have someone on the excavator and so forth? So what we've been trying to do over the last year, and that added position, is to allow us to work with 2 crews at the same time. So we can work at Main Street, and we can work over on Beauchamp Point. We can work up on Meadow Street, and we can work over on, wherever, Mill Street. If we can only do one thing at one time, which is when we had just the one mini excavator, we were sort of hamstrung. Oh, we got to move it here, move it here, move it here. So totally inefficient and not really the best use for our people. So by that one person, that opens us up to be able to have 2 crews working at once. It allows us to be able to do multiple things. And with all the added road work and paving that we've added to the schedule, that means there's more ditching. Buildings and grounds, I effectively stole somebody from a plow route and being able to work, which was not Mike's favorite thing. I wasn't his favorite person, but in the end, we're really much further ahead. So, but I think it's a question because you look at that and it's like, what the heck is going on here?
Sure.
Good question.
Okay, anything else on Public Works? Thank you, Mike. Are we going to move now to Parks or let Ben lead?
Thank you, Mike. Don't go anywhere yet. We got Parks.
Okay. That's okay with Stan.
Well, I got one question I forgot to ask.
Okay, John has one more question. Go ahead, John.
The Revenue Local Road Assistance Program, what is that?
We get a percent, whatever we invest into our roads, the state has a formula, a percentage-based formula based on how much work we've done, that they then give us money back for putting money into our
So that's how
roads.
much work we've actually done.
No, it's based upon lane miles that we maintain.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's relatively static. The difference is that the amount of money they have varies a little bit, so that's why it's 61. Yeah, it's 61, it's 62.
But they weren't using like a rubric of, how many miles did you repave
No,
this year? They're just
no.
saying you have this many miles in your town.
That's right. Now, what we have to do is then tell them, what do we apply that $62,000 for? So that's where, we paved 7 mile road. Oh, okay. Well, there used to be a time when that $62,000 was more than some towns spent on their road budget. That's been that was the same number 20 years ago. So, gas tax hasn't moved, those types of things. So,
Let's move it.
anyway, does that help answer your question, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next we're going to move to Parks, 261.
I'm going to advocate for expeditious
Yeah,
motions any way we can. It's 8 o'clock, and we've only done 2 so far.
we did Public Works, which I think
Yeah.
was such an
Oh,
important
yeah,
one,
very,
but I
yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
that.
But we got a lot to go.
Okay.
Okay, so Parks, anybody have any questions?
We're in Parks or?
Parks,
Parks, page 261.
Why did we not put any money last year into Walker Park reserve deposit, but yet we are this year? What's the difference?
And we're not putting any in
Hope
this year
springs
either.
eternal.
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad.
Yep.
Never mind.
I mean, I think the question too is why should we not put any in? Do we have any projects? I'm assuming we've been putting stuff into the reserve knowing something at Walker Park is gonna be coming.
The issue is that the RES site that is going to be started construction on this summer is a big playground. And not that anything can replace Walker Park, it has unique features, but we're a small town and we have a lot of parks. And, you know, those two parks are relatively close to each other. So the thinking was, you know, at least on the town side, that let's wait and see how this RES park plays out and what needs to be done.
So that was being saved for the playground that's looking, 10 years out, because it's now, or whatever,
Not
it was
a-
8 years out, because that was not a cheap playground.
The one that's there now, yeah. that
Yeah.
Walker Park.
So,
And probably to replace it's probably, $80,000-$90,000.
Yeah, probably.
So, I understand what Denise is saying. I differ with her a little bit, though, that Walker Park is a very unique park. And it's used very much by locals in that neighborhood that has children. So, the playground doesn't need to be replaced right now, so it doesn't kill us to miss a year or so. And I understand what Denise is saying, it's 2 parks, and do we need both of them? But I don't think her feelings.
Oh, I'm not trying to say we should get rid of Walker.
Yeah, well, the equipment and stuff, so it's, not
mean,
everybody on the Parks Committee feels that way, but we understand tight budget year, so.
I mean, every year's a tight budget year. This has been the best year. This has been the lowest increase in the last 3, hasn't it?
I don't know. I still
the
have,
lowest
my
one
knots,
I've ever
the knots in my stomach still can't tell
Still
me.
at 14%.
It's still rough, but yeah,
So, I mean, at some point,
I know.
there's gonna be no great year to save money, and if we put it in a reserve and have that money, we still have that money next year that we can pull back out.
What is our reserve right now for that? I think we're on
20-something.
36,000.
36, yeah.
36, okay.
I think my feeling on this is that while it is and I agree with Doug, I mean, a lot of us grew up playing there and whatnot. I think we have to figure out where do all the parks fit, right? What is their value? Is replacing that playground equipment the answer at Walker Park? I don't know the answer to that question yet. Should we be focusing on the grade and making it more ADA accessible? There's a lot of questions I have that go with that park in general, and the RES park it adds another question mark to that. So again, I agree with you. We're at 36,000. That could be halfway towards something, it sounds like. But I don't know that I would feel, if somebody said, here's the other 40, we're ready to spend $80,000. I don't know that I'd feel ready, that I'd want to
That
pull
would
the
be the right
trigger.
investment, right.
You know what I mean? I love the fact the merry-go-round's back. I
Yes,
love that
Wheeler
thing.
Death.
We still got the skin knees to
Yeah.
prove it probably.
We all survived.
Chip teeth, don't
That's
forget
right.
the chip teeth.
That's right. We
They're
got it.
all real.
I want that metal slide back.
I know, yeah.
Nothing like a good old burn on a
That's
summer
right.
day.
So I guess my worry is we
Yeah.
just spent a whole conversation talking about deferred maintenance on the road.
Yep.
And now, I'm not saying we necessarily need to have that swing
Yeah.
set replaced this year, but if our whole point was we need to not defer maintenance, when it comes time for replacing something, we should have money for it. So if we save it now, again, it's still saved, and if in 3 years we say, well, we're not really gonna put a swing set there, now we've got 50 grand for
Metal slide.
8 more parking spots.
Yeah.
6 more parking spots. Whatever.
I would just feel, I think as long as the vision is constant on that, Clay, I would agree with you. I don't, it's too cloudy to me right now what that vision of that future is there. You know, I agree in concept with what you're saying, like, there's gonna be an expense there. I just don't know if it's 36,000 or 136,000, you know, and I just have a hard time saying 12 is the number, not 15, not 20. And so unless I don't know that, I don't feel like I can say, all right, I feel good about this plan. But I agree with, I think that the fundamentals of what you're saying are 100% correct.
By next year, we should have a pretty good idea of what's
I
gonna
think
go
so.
on because of what happened.
Yeah,
with
because the
RES.
park
The
will
park,
be,
right.
See what the utilization is and all
yeah,
that.
and we can then start listening to residents about what they want or think of that area.
I find this discussion so encouraging that you guys are so interested in that. And, you know, we'll go back to the Parks Committee now and say, you know, this is important for the Select Board, the Budget Committee. You know, what do we sort of envision? What does the town envision for this park going forward? And I appreciate your interest.
Any other questions on parks?
What do you want to do about the 12,000? Leave it out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I just heard the cemeteries conversation, I just want to point everybody's attention to $78,500 for
Mowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is great, I have a retirement plan now, this meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's harder to get into.
Careful.
Always
you think,
mowing
right?
service.
I know how to find you.
The cost increase is just staggering.
Yeah, I mean, that added to cemeteries is $200,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Our total contracted mowing expense is $271,000.
For this year.
Right.
I mean, our parks are not all level either. They're
Yeah.
funky designs, that's
Yeah.
a problem.
That's right.
When do we get robotic mowers? That's-
We tried those at the rec fields and it
Didn't go
failed
well.
miserably.
Does great on my little lawn.
You can always bring in the goats.
Perfectly flat.
Like a billiard
table.
Okay. Anything else on parks?
No. Nice.
Okay.
What, actually,
Go ahead,
real
Clay.
quick, the outside contractor, the 3090 top line, what projects was that for?
The 5,000 that's budgeted
Yeah,
there?
the 5,000. I think in the notes it just said for,
Based on
Increase
historical
based on
spending.
historical spending, yeah.
Yeah, it just says based on
30,
historical
90?
spending. Yeah, for the 5,000.
Mike, you know what that is?
Yeah, I would have to look to see what we had planned for that one. Didn't get a lot in the notes.
Yeah, but also like last year, you know, $3,761 is a very specific number.
Yeah.
And it wasn't spent this year, so what was that allocated for and not used?
Or is it just an invoice we haven't used?
3090.
3090, very first.
With, with the parks, a lot of our costs are seen in the spring. Not necessarily when we close the parks up for the winter, but when we open them up for the summer.
Yeah, anything to do with Glen Cove or, do you know?
This, I mean, could our lawn care, could that be the lawn care?
No, it's under
It's not
mowing.
lawn care.
No, that's
it's
cleaning up.
100,
Maintenance, yeah.
1,000% of that.
Okay, well, let's find that, we'll find that out and let everybody know.
With the bridge reconstruction, is that ever, that wouldn't touch the parks budget? That'd all be outside of this, or is there anything to think about overlap with parks there?
The bridge to Marine Park?
The Goose
Oh,
River,
yeah.
the big,
Oh,
the
the
road
big
bridge.
project
if
is
there's
gonna
any-
happen.
No,
think
I
so,
don't,
not in
I don't think so. I think largely, so what's been discussed, and Doug, jump in here where I'm, but what's been discussed in terms of connections beyond that, obviously there's the VPI study, right, which I know you're familiar with, right? And so there's that aspect to it, which is obviously much more comprehensive, Pascal Ave all the way to Graffham's, like it's soup to nuts, right? What there isn't, so the piece that sort of came in the middle of that was the bridge and the second sidewalk, all right? So that second sidewalk, which would be effectively to the harbor side of the bridge, for those who are unfamiliar, they will build that bridge, and they will terminate the sidewalk on that side roughly to where the entrance is to the pump station. Now, at some point, somehow, and I would expect probably in Mike's budget would be the most logical place to put that, would be a continuation of that sidewalk. And so it does connect. And they're expecting us to be able to do that at some point. Now, we're gonna talk when planning and development comes up about the VPI and some efforts that maybe we're happening on the federal level to actually look at that whole comprehensive effort and would include that package. But right now, I look at that connection from that road to largely Freya's as something that is somewhat in play. Would you agree with that, Doug?
Yeah, it's not part of a park though.
No,
But the entrance to Kramer Park, that may get shifted around
Yeah.
during construction. We are gonna run a sidewalk or a pathway down the entry road to the Harbor Park.
Yep.
So there's that, but,
Nothing
no
really-
real effect on
Yeah.
our parks.
We could find some money for illicit flower boxes, I think.
Illicit flower box.
So, again, this mowing number, is that only what we're paying for contractors, or does that include
Yeah.
what part, okay.
That's just.
That's a check to Farley Incorporated.
Gotcha, I wasn't sure if that's what Glenn and his team were part of too, mowing some parks.
Nope.
All right.
All
Sorry
right.
about that.
Moving on from parks, we have library, page
Ben.
247.
Waiting
got
all
Ben
this
here.
Patiently.
And hopefully I made it easy for y'all.
Most of you probably know, but when you look at the library budget, all the grade lines are all paid for by the library committee. So it's
We
not part of
really
town
love the
budget.
library committee.
It's a
Let's just
very-
say that. We are very appreciative of the library committee.
Me too.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Keep between the ditches out there, young
That's
fella.
right.
Okay, any questions about the library budget?
Not that I'm overly concerned, because we budgeted for it last year and we don't even pay for it, but the miscellaneous professional services, what was that for?
Could you give us the line number?
Yeah,
Yeah.
3060.
3060. It's for anything that comes up that I don't expect, basically. I've used it in the past for like website design. I've used it for when I've had to interface with like Mike and Glenn to get something fixed. Pretty much any of those little weird things that have come up. I mean, I don't have a list off the top of my
Yeah, right,
head.
yeah.
Some years it's a lot and some years it's nothing. And so some of those years that it was bigger was when we were moving in, the building was new, we didn't
Yeah, right.
anticipate things, and it was like, oh, we got to take care of that.
Yeah.
Like the automatic doors, stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried to be really, really conservative. I think I've only raised the amount that the town has to pay for by $580 this year.
Thank
Well
you,
done.
Ben.
I mean,
Thank
in
you.
those, there's other things,
Right.
but I did my best.
Show off.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I hear there might be somebody hiring.
We'll talk later.
I mean, I see him work in that park a lot next to me.
I keep offering, oh no.
Anything else? We can make up some time? Oh, John, go ahead.
Just a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
First of all, Ben, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
So you're doing an amazing job, and the whole crew over there is just great.
Sounds like a butt company.
But,
There's no but. Ben knows it's sincere. But, you've got some great numbers too, and so I just want to have everybody pay attention to that, our program attendance, you've been doing some great programming. It's getting people to show up. The patron visits are holding steady.
Yeah.
Circulation, it's increasing, even with that hiccup with the interlibrary loan.
Yeah.
So let's go to that library parking. How big is a deal is that for you?
I get a complaint almost every day from June through October. I mean, that's pretty regular that somebody says I couldn't find a parking space, or why don't you have more parking, or whatever. And I gently say, oh, select board, John, those are the people you have to talk to. Because they know this, I tell them it all the time. So yeah, it's pretty regular. And then most days there are times when all of the spots are taken up. And it's around when we have programming, you know.
And so will the 7 really address your problem, or it's just a little bit better?
It will make a huge difference, I will say. I don't know. Plus, I don't know where we would put more than 7. I mean, we could use more probably. When we did, so back in the day, now we're talking years ago, we did a study, a year-long parking study about what we were doing out when we were out on Route 1. And we said 14 is sort of our high water mark for the average day. Not when we have like a big program that brings in 30, 40 people just at one time, but through the course of the day when it's like, oh, French group comes or the bridge group or something, and then just regular patrons. We were like, 14 was the average high water mark that we were like, okay, things have changed a lot since then, and we are much busier since then. So, you know, I don't have data that would say, oh no, we actually would need 14, like 18 or 20 parking spots to do that. So I can't really answer your question. I do think more would be better, but there's no real place for more.
Yeah, I realize you're not going to know until it happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't studied it. We just know that, you know, I really honestly think 7's what I can get. So I'm trying for 7.
And again, though, you know, sure, it looks like parking and it sort of gets labeled that way. But we all know that Opera House functions use it, the restaurants use it. So, you know, to answer your question, you know, it's going to be spit in the bucket for the whole downtown area. But fix it, select board, please. You've been dealing with it for years.
Is it 7 spaces currently?
I didn't have a vote on the select board, but we did 7.
Well, yeah, we have seven sort of line spaces, and then a couple sort of like swing in, drop off, and then 1 handicap, and then there's the street, which doesn't really count around it, and we'll fill all those. Yeah.
I probably should have asked, when we're building the new parking spaces, does it interfere with the usage of the ones that we already have?
So wait, when they're building the new ones?
While they're building
I
the new
am
ones.
sure it will. I mean, Mike, that's probably a question for Mike.
I should have asked him.
But like, I don't know where else you would stage things or do things. John can say it, he's looking at me different, but I'm anticipating it being.
I don't think, I think there might be one spot that gets in the way, but largely you're up the hill.
Oh, that's awesome.
You're up the hill and you're in the park. So
Okay.
I don't
get that in writing?
Yeah.
No.
Require a lot of room to turn around, so.
Yeah.
And I'm with you, I think you're gonna house them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm anticipating there being parking issues when we're building the new parking.
I don't think it's gonna take that long to do though.
Oh, that's good.
I think
Well, that's good.
I think it will be a relatively seamless process.
That fire station was supposed to be that long.
I
I just had a truck in my garage the entire winter.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I will say when they built it, they did do all the grading work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still probably
yeah,
will
the
be
prep
some,
work was done
but they
for
did
that.
the prep work for those 7 spots that will hopefully add.
So it's less expensive to build this out than it would be if it hadn't been prepped
Yeah.
before.
Was there ever any planning done to just turn Memorial Park into a parking lot?
You're right. You're left to answer that question. He's the best
Bring a
one.
man to tears over
I
there.
think we were accused of that during the library discussions.
In retrospect, I mean, look, my solution is to pick up the library
Yeah.
and move it to the RES site, which is where it should have been built.
Yes.
Where we had plenty of parking.
I've got another
Nice,
question.
far too short.
But I
But
mean,
we're
just
we're
so we
past
have
that.
a parking problem.
Bill,
This is gonna help by this much
Yeah.
at a frightful cost. It's like, at some point, we gotta lean into the parking problem downtown. That seems like a place to do it.
Well, the first thing you could do is start charging for parking downtown, or start enforcing the 2-hour parking that we have, and cost at least several $1,000s to paint that striping, the labor to do it and everything, and, nothing ever came of that. And you could, if you started charging for parking, you'd probably have less cars, and you'd also find that this budget would probably not be as desperate as it is. When Booth Bay, put in their paid for parking, the first year, now it's Booth Bay, $500,000. Now, why the select board leaves that money on the table is beyond me.
Well, I think there are questions to be asked of the select board when this all started, why those issues didn't get addressed, but I'll leave that for another time, Doug. But I would say that I think the spit in the bucket, I think was your phrase.
Yeah.
I think it's worth for the low, I realize it's 80,000, I don't think it will be 80,000, but for what that is, the value versus the cost, it is a good value for us. And I think there are spots that we can add 2, 3, 4 all around the village without too much pain and suffering for everyone that neighbors can appreciate. As you remember, Doug, there was a large effort, a part of the VPI that discussed, let's make Winter Street one way and have parking along there. And you might as well have said, we're gonna, blow up the town, and it was not greeted warmly by residents of Winter Street, Mechanic Street, and the like. So, obviously, this is a hot button issue. Paid parking is a hot button issue, and I think we're still trying to let things settle from a new hotel and
a library.
And a library, and that has changed the village to a great degree. And it doesn't look like the village I grew up in, but we got to react and deal with it as it is. And I think the VPI study is a good start to do that in a comprehensive way that makes a number of people satisfied with the results. I think that's our path forward.
We're not happy till they're not happy.
Well,
I have one more question for Ben.
Okay, John, go ahead.
So Ben, one issue I do have is when we originally built the library and we named it the Rockport Room, and the way it was designed, it was supposed to have the ability to be used in the evening for community functions, and I'm not seeing that happen. Is there a reason for that?
You mean outside of library hours?
Yeah. I mean, it just hasn't really been revisited. I don't have the staff to do that. So, there needs to be a staff member on hand to run that. If you're going to rent the room out when the library is not happening, there still needs to be somebody there. And as of right now, that doesn't exist in the town. I mean, we used it to great effect when we couldn't use this room. We had all the meetings were over there. And I think that was a really good thing. I mean, but yeah, no, when we're not using it, it is closed right now. So, yeah.
So it would take one additional staff person to be there the whole time of functions going on, and that's essentially the only additional expense to make it available?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a staffing issue. That was not something that we were planning staff for at the library. Yeah. So you would have to hire somebody for special events to be there to do that, and that's a difficult thing.
Could it be shared with Opera House, or I know later on we're talking about an events person, so potential.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not territorial like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fine if the town wants to use the town building for things after hours. It is designed.
You just need somebody.
Yeah, we need somebody to arm it, to do it. We would have to then see some of that budget go into sort of the upkeep of the room. That would be my only thing, because then there would be more wear and tear. But I mean, it's not a bad idea. It was always designed that way. I mean, the only thing that we can't do is lock the elevator so people can get upstairs that way, but you can lock the door at the top of the stairs. There's safety exits, there's AEDs, there's everything that you would need downstairs to do that. you know, but we just can't yet.
Yeah, and have you had a huge demand or questions about that?
I mean, when we first opened, people asked about it occasionally, but it wasn't something we could really do. I mean, we looked at a fee schedule with the Opera House manager at that time, and it was pretty high because
Yeah.
it was the same for here to do that, but that was market value at the time. I don't even know what it would be now if you were renting that out to people. So.
Yeah, so maybe that's a discussion with the sort of marketing of the Opera House. That gets added to the list of
Revenue.
available
Right,
venues.
could be revenue.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to schedule it and make sure it all worked and
You'd be
make
part
sure.
of
I
those
mean, I'm sure we
discussions.
can all play nice, though.
Yeah.
You'd be a part of those discussions.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not worried about it.
Anything else on the library? Thank you, Ben.
Thank you,
no
Ben.
problem.
Good
Thank you
night. We
all.
appreciate you.
Yeah,
sticking
have a great
around for
night.
that. Thank you for all that you and your staff do over there. Okay, next, Opera House, 267.
So let me just say this at the outset of this, because we've had a conversation going on for a few years now. So let me try to take a little bit of this out at the start of this. So over the last couple of years, we've been talking about the need to talk about the condition of this building and get an assessment of that condition. I've signed that contract this week. So that is going to be going on over the next couple months. Same individuals working at this building, public safety building, town office building, and public works. That's the contingency money. So we will have, by this summer, an assessment of this building and all its pros and cons and where the costs are and what those may be.
In that assessment, that includes like integrity of the building.
Yeah,
along with
exactly. HVAC.
Accessibility, all that.
Yeah, like the sprinkler system, the whole kit and caboodle that, all the issues that we've talked about over years. And then there can be a time to really talk about in a real sense, what does that mean? Where do you go? What's your path forward? So that's the predominant issue. There were, obviously, we talked about the damage, and that has clearly improved the conditions in the main, in the Parker room. It looks almost brand new, and effectively it is brand new. Flooring, sheetrock, paint, lighting, everything here looks good. Flooring upstairs, but there's far more to this building than that. The stair chair is frequently breaking. We've got, window issues, we've got paint issues on the exterior, we have HVAC, we have sprinkler issues. For those of you who are new to this conversation, that's obviously concerning, but this is something that those who've been involved and budget committee members who've been here have heard this spiel before. So we need to do that. At the same time, we need to try to make this space, and we've been, trying to make this space as profitable, I suppose, as it can be, providing events and providing programming for the community to come in and take part here, but also to try to make revenue, produce revenues off that can offset some of our costs to maintain this building. Megan is our this is one of the many hats that Megan wears, so she oversees our staff here. And yes, there's definitely some sharing. I mean, to Ben's point, there's a lot of, Paul is here, Paul is everywhere, Paul is our sort of jack of all trades, cleaner, just one of a kind type of fella. Yeah. And then we have two folks who are programming this space. Carrie, who's sort of more of outward planning, and then we have Rebecca, who is more of the private events, but also marketing and the like. And then we have tech, and obviously Jeff is a big part of that role. We've had a number of people in the last couple of years who, on an as-needed basis are brought in to make the lights go on and off. But I think there are definitely long-term conversations to be had about this building. but they're somewhat incomplete until I have that assessment before me and before you all to say, this is what a good investment here is, this is what a bad investment here is.
We need someone to adopt the Opera House.
We would love
do.
to,
We need a
like a
Friends of the
neighbor
Opera.
or.
We
Just
do,
kidding.
we need a foundation,
seriously.
we need something.
Seriously.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
You can even park out in front.
I'll go one further, this won't make, I mean, is part of the evaluation doing a market assessment to see what we could sell it for?
No, this is only really wall to wall, what do we have? I think that could definitely be part of, I think there'll be
Bigger
another
picture.
phase of this.
Right,
which
we have to
will
go to
be-
the town at
There
some
you go.
point and say it's gonna cost us $650,000.
Right, and is that,
100%.
is
Do
that
we
worth
want
the
to keep it,
investment?
or do we sell
Right.
it and let somebody turn it into condos?
That's it.
Right.
Well, no, because there's the third option, which Michelle just said, is that, we need to either form or find a group of benefactors that are the Opera House Foundation, that every year they have their annual fund drive, and they keep this place
And they
well
support
taken
it,
care
right.
of and used.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
I
I
think
mean,
we
it's-
ought to start right now, because
Yeah.
it's gonna be expensive no matter what. I don't know who's gonna lead that, but again, this town has a fair number of affluent residents who, for a long time, have really supported events in this Opera House. And we should be able to do it. There's no reason that this town could not find a group of people that could,
Maybe the Leshers would like to
maintain
know.
this. Go figure,
One of the gentlemen that I've just recently brought on as a technical person is the tech director down at the Waldo Theater. They just went through that whole process, and I'm sure they will, in conversations, and maybe a more official thing, we'll be able to learn from their experience and what we might be able to do.
Did it work?
Did it work for Waldo? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Doing really well.
They have programming out the wazoo, and physically, the improvement is significant.
Yeah.
And I think that they were at the same stage of, what do we do with this building? Do we sell it for condos,
Yeah.
6 years ago?
So, do we have to wait till next budget year to?
No, I think there's learning
Start
that,
talking to people, that would be
Right.
great.
yeah.
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 All of us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
I mean, honestly, I think that's what it's gonna take, right? I mean, because we can't, I mean, this is the heart and soul of our community. I think several of us sit here bobbed for apples upstairs when we were young and did the parade down Union Street. So it's kind of the heart and soul of our community,
Yeah.
right? But, well, we have to be realistic because our taxes, as we know, are going up. And can we, in good faith, say to the community, I need $1 million to save this building? We probably can't. But to your point, Doug, we have a lot of people in this community who might lean into that, to say, yeah, let's form a foundation, let's do something to help support and keep it active in the community, because it is so important. So, I mean, I think it begs, we've been talking about it for a long time, right? We've had other priorities, but we've been talking about it a long time, that we need a group of people to do that, to save this building, realistically.
and to some extent, not to say that we have to absolutely wait until that we would have a sort of a fundraising effort with this group, because there's a dollar amount known that it will take to
Right,
get
it
this
helps.
building up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's sort of a
Helps.
goal.
And some of the hardest part too, I think, is that no one has a clear vision of what,
Right.
even if the town still owned it and the town had a vision and wanted to work towards that vision, that's one thing, but it doesn't seem like there's a unanimous or even close to vision for what should be here, or
What
even
this
a
could be.
vision.
It's hard with Bay Chamber gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a
Really
issue.
difficult.
Yeah.
It's a huge issue, and I mean, for much of those of us who grew up here, for much of our lives, this was Bay Chambers building, right?
Right.
And the last 3 years, it hasn't been.
Right.
It's been, contra dancing, it's been this and that and the other, and so it's a different thing, to Clay's point, and so we gotta define that, but I think we can, I think there's a desire for that heart and soul to live and breathe. It's just gotta be something that makes fiscal sense too,
Absolutely,
right?
right.
And if we can make that happen, let's go.
And I don't think Bay Chamber, their new building is lovely, but it doesn't have a
It's a bad
concert hall
space,
like
yeah.
this.
Doesn't have
Well,
that.
it does. They have 240 seats.
But it's
in-
not a very good
The
one.
acoustics.
I'm gonna,
It's fine.
but
It's a great
they,
recital hall.
they have
It's not a
something
great
that works for
concert
them
venue.
with a significant, and that was, it's a named room.
I'm just saying there might be still some room going forward
Yeah.
where there could be
Manuel, I
some
know,
marquee
has
events that would be
said
here.
that
Yeah.
he'd still like to have concerts here.
But for instance, they had, who's the Reverend? The Christmas time thing that used to be
The Harlem
upstairs for the
Gospel
last 2
Choir.
years.
Yeah.
And they went to the church, the Congo church, because it just felt more contained for the officers there. So I think that there's still things that will happen here under their auspices, but it is a new chapter for this building.
Just a
Could
quick.
be a
oh,
parking
sorry.
garage.
Yeah.
There you
Or get
go.
20 spaces.
Ton.
Just a
Michelle.
quick question. I know we brought on a new rental agent, but do we have enough work full-time for, it sounds like 2 people are kind of doing outside events, inside events. I mean, do we really have enough work for 2 people full-time for that?
They're 2 part-time.
2 part-time, okay.
So, Rebecca, who focuses on rentals and marketing, works anywhere from 15 to 20 hours
Okay.
a week.
I thought they
and
were 2
then
full-time, okay.
Carrie, who works pretty much solely on like town-sponsored events here, the summer concert series in the park, and then events at the harbor. She works like 7 to 10 hours a week.
Okay.
But those are good questions, because when you look at the revenue generated by the Opera House versus what we're paying.
Versus the expenses,
for
right.
employees.
I had a question, because it looks like the run rate, sort of year-to-date figures for a lot of these categories are quite a bit lower than what's budgeted. You know, like wages, we've spent 30,000 year-to-date, but had 120, and we're forecasting 125, is that?
So we haven't been billed for a lot of our video tech work. So that will take a good chunk out of that.
That would go into wages.
Correct.
We love our tech people.
On the revenue, the, like, R1057, administrative cost for your tech, that 25 grand, where's that 25 grand actually coming from?
It comes from people that rent the facility and pay for a video tech to be here.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
And we require anybody that rents the facility, we require them to use one of our video techs instead of bringing in their own.
Yeah.
One of the toughest cuts that I made here was the building improvements. I did move that into a building reserve for $20,000 down from the $50,000 that we had put in for the past year. Now that amount is what we'll use for this study, so that, you know, that will be used. But that is, you know, that's a cut more than half of what eventually we know there'll be something that we already know, for example, the sprinkler issue exists, we know the HVAC issue exists, we know the painting needs to be done, like, we know there are things, but again, trying to, that vision still being a bit cloudy and wanting to put our best foot forward in meeting that, that's why it's 20 instead of the same 50 that was there.
So you cut the sprinkler?
I didn't cut the sprinkler, I just cut the amount in overall building improvements and I made it a reserve.
No,
so-
in 4110.
Oh, 4110?
Yep.
Went from 15 to.
Oh, yeah,
15
because
to
that was,
75.
I think I was trying to go with historical numbers as opposed to the 15. And I don't remember, let's see, what was I
Probably have an
that?
explanation.
No, there's an explanation.
I'm trying to remember where, I think I was leaning on the historical because of the fact that if there's a problem, you pay for what that problem is regardless. And so the 1444, again, you're rolling the dice. All these issues here, especially on the sprinkler side, we could easily have a $15,000 repair, you know, but again, I'm trying
Not to have that.
try not to, right, yeah, but, and we, you know, just so everyone understands, we talked about what happened and what caused the damage with that sprinkler issue. What subsequently, our buildings and grounds crew rigged up this battery-operated system that would ensure that we will not, the system won't charge in case of a power outage. So that was really why eventually we had the break in the sprinkler line. So we're even though we know to drain it, we have double protection to ensure that doesn't occur again. So again, that's another value-added thing Buildings and Grounds did.
So I see $15,000 for advertising, marketing, and booking, and $14,590 in Opera House rentals. So we're not even covering marketing costs with our rentals. And I know we're sort of in a rebuilding period, I guess you'd say, for the Opera House, as it sort of gets its feet under it, but these numbers are...
The 1495 is only what we've collected since December, from July to December. There are a ton of events scheduled between
So we have
the
significantly
1st of
more
April through
revenue.
June.
Okay, so we're gonna see that revenue number.
I project that we'll meet the 25,000 that I've put for this
For the-
coming year.
Okay, I was wondering how realistic the 25 is. Okay. That's a good start. Any other questions on the Opera House? And I know Walker and his wife Ally have been, I think, once they get their new life sort of under control, are very interested. in
Great
working with us.
ambitions for
Yeah. Yeah.
children.
That's so.
We all
takes-
did.
Yeah, and congratulations. It's still recent enough. Congratulations. Okay, I think we're done with Opera House. And we are 4 minutes ahead of schedule.
Wow.
Okay, general assistance, 155.
4 minutes ahead of schedule.
So this is, general assistance is an area that I expected to have major change given the conversations that we had in this room in the fall. But in retrospect, due to some changes in some of the operations of some of the hotels in the area, I think we can maintain a status quo in terms of the type of services we're providing. VOA, which is Volunteers of America, we've contracted with them for the last couple of years. Originally, we were part of a 3-town agreement with VOA, with Camden and Rockland and Rockport, where they had one person who worked for them providing mental health and really GA diversion. So trying to assist these people to access all the resources that are out there, not really just solely looking at the general assistance program as their solution. And that's worked very well for us. The person who has been working on VOA's behalf actually lives right in town, lives in Rockport. She's in our office every Wednesday afternoon, and works with Diane, who's my assistant, to really work with these clients and try to help them. She's also engaged with our police department as well. So I think that's a program that has worked very well for us. We are still seeing claims for general assistance, even though those changes with the hotels have occurred. So I don't foresee us being able to walk away from the problem and suggest that maybe we can go back to the way things were before, where you had a general assistance administrator and it's Rockport residents who can't afford their fuel. It's Rockport residents who are in their home and they need help with their rent. There's still the issue of homelessness or unhoused. That is still coming to bear and still coming in our door. And still, it's a regional problem that Rockport is having to solve in some capacity, and probably a disproportionate capacity, to be honest.
John, I was familiar with the concept of the operation of the motels and stuff, but what has changed now?
So they're moving. Schooner Bay has been closed since I think January.
Why is that? Just because they closed for the season, or
No,
was it state ordered, or
No.
zoning?
Well, maybe. I know that they're going to change focus. They're going to be a focus on the.
Sorry.
That's all right. I hope my time was up.
Thank you, John.
But no, they're going to change their focus to really cater to the tourist community. and be open from, you know, the tourist season.
But isn't that what they did before?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Always.
But filled it in with general assistance
Yeah, they would,
vouchers.
yeah. So that's really the issue, is anybody, any business, Samoset, anybody could accept a general assistance voucher. But those two entities, Rockport Suites and Schooner Bay, were the two that were most frequently accepting those vouchers. And so what that meant is if you're unhoused and Rockport can find a place for you, or there's a place that you can find a place to stay, Rockport has to cover that. Now, we cover that, we get reimbursed from the state, 70%, but that's a burden that
Still
our office is
30%,
taking
right.
on.
Yeah.
And
The
that's 30%.
non-Rockport resident, I mean,
Right,
they're not
still
necessarily
30% that
residents.
Rockport residents
Yeah.
are paying.
And that brought with it a lot of other problems.
Emergency services.
Not just a matter
Yep.
of giving
Police.
them a bed to sleep in, it was
Yep.
a lot of other issues.
Yeah. And so, while that has, it seems those hotels will be dealing with things differently, I don't think the problem has gone away. There's been some hotels that have slightly opened that door crack to some vouchers. And in a general sense, the state has not changed the game at all, right? And there's still a housing shortage in Mid-Coast Maine, and there's still a lack of affordability of housing in Mid-Coast Maine. So those problems are going to sustain, and nothing is going to change them. And until that goes away, I don't feel great about stepping back in
And
terms of
we're
that
doing
DOA
our
program.
part here tonight with this budget.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wish it weren't, but, you know, we have to protect ourselves, and trying to provide diversion just does allow us to try to backstop that, because the idea that my assistant has enough time to be able to find every program under the sun for the 6 clients who came in that week is not realistic. That's not that's an undue burden. And then on top of that, I think I mentioned it the other night, there are some changes in state law that are coming in that will deal with, you know, mental health, language, translation services for those who are requesting the general assistance aid, which is just far and beyond what that service has been and what it really, in my opinion, should be. So, all of that being said, I think this is our best stab going forward to try to, hold the line. If 1,000 people show up tomorrow, the law says we have to follow that law and we have to serve those people. And the law says that we have to fund that. And regardless of what we say tonight about what the GA budget should or shouldn't be, it doesn't matter, because the law says we have to spend what it takes to meet the law. So that's not my permission slip for that to happen, but I just so we all understand, the GA budget is really is a dart at a dartboard, and while we can talk about numbers and whatever, it's the best we can do is hope that we're doing all we can to not allow that service to be taken advantage of in Rockport. And I can say pretty strongly that's the case. We're doing everything we can to hold the line and follow the law as it's written.
Do we know what the other communities are doing who used to use the VOA contract and are no longer?
So,
Camden has trust funds that they pull from.
they have trust funds. The city of Rockland has.
So trust funds, but then do they have personnel who know how to send people to different resources? I mean, they are using money.
Right. They're
Yeah.
self-administering the program.
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about the VOA contract, the
Well, they use
35,000.
VOA, don't they?
No, they can't,
They're
they're not.
ending that as well.
Oh, they're
Yeah.
ending.
That's why we
Yeah.
got into it, because the other communities were all doing it, and we
Yeah.
joined them, and now we're the only ones left.
Right. So we would have our own agreement with VOA under this sort of situation. Rockland has hired staff that will work under their police department, who will really handle some of the mental health issues. Again, and I do want to mention this, and Randy probably will on Monday night, but we are the home to the hospital. And that does introduce into our, little 3,600 person town, an entirely different element that other communities don't have to face. I think our relations with Penn Bay Medical Center have improved, and I think, some of the things that we're frustrations or irritations in terms of their lack of engagement on issues of mental health and the like. I think they've improved. But it's still a hospital in Rockport, and there's a 24-hour nature to that. So, and that does affect GA, because there are people who show up to the hospital who have nowhere else to go, and the hospital will call our office and say, you need to find a place for them. And that's what this service usually ends up being, is funding through GA.
John?
And the new legislation from the state has now extended the minimum, the requirement for us to provide housing to 12 months from 1 month. Yet we're showing here that,
That's if you have it, right?
So we've the inventory of rental opportunities is diminished greatly.
Yeah.
But
It's
we're
still
also-
funded on a 30-day basis, though. So the maximums have changed, but you still would have that snapshot. Every case for general assistance is 30 days at a time. So even in that, you still have them come back after 30 days and say, okay, have you applied for work? What's your situation? Have you talked to so-and-so? Have you, are you getting out of this place? Or what's your, okay, I'll give you another 7 days, but you need to do this, this, and this. That's how the program's supposed to work. And it has, frankly, but what the difference is that the state said everyone's an emergency. If you're unhoused, everything's an emergency. You've got to deal with them right then and there, and you've got to find them a house or find them housing. And so as a result, because everyone is emergency, then there were no rules. You would normally say, okay, what's your income? What's your expenses? What's your situation? All you had to know is you're in Rockport and you're unhoused. That's it. Emergency. Fund them. Before, you had to go through that step. And so we'll see how, right now, I don't see the winds blowing back to the old way, right? But I do think we still have those hooks of the 30-day window that I hope can hold us to keep some sanity.
Luckily, we have a lot of short-term rentals we can do.
So my question is a little bit related to the other one, which is, and this is going to be the question I'm going to ask repeatedly on Monday when public safety is in here, but this multi-town approach that we talked about earlier, to what degree are you guys as town leaders talking to each other about a collective sort of strategic set of thinking about how we address this issue? All the towns are dealing with it. It doesn't seem sensible. I understand that legally each town is responsible for whoever stumbles into their town, but this seems like, just like public safety, I will argue on Monday, seems like cries out for a regional, strategic, long-term, combining resources type of strategy. I don't know to what degree you've been talking with other towns about this, and I get this, whatever contract they got rid of, but it feels like good conversation might be had.
How do I answer this, Steve?
There are a lot of agencies I'd like to
when I started doing this 17 years ago, there was a much stronger vision of collective need and collective, we're all gonna
responsibility.
Right. We're all gonna link our arms and we're gonna solve it together. And I have seen that slowly slip away over 17 years to a point where, even fire mutual aid, even, things that are really surprising, people are not willing to sort of ignore, and as a result, the singular approaches occur, right? I'm not going to get into some parts of that obviously feel, but I think I've seen that, and it's troubling because the problems are getting harder. They're not getting easier. They're getting more expensive. But I just encounter more and more other communities say, we're going to do it our way and to hell with you, to put it mildly. And I don't appreciate that approach. I don't agree with that approach. I know we'll talk about other regional efforts that, you know, were a certain way. But I think, I hope that we're gonna enter in here. The other thing I would say is there's been a lot of forest fires that people have been putting out. There's, you know, the last 4 years have been a period of, I don't have enough staff to do anything. I can offer an unlimited amount of money and I can't find people to do the work. There's a lot of that maybe is driving it. I think there's a lot of immaturity in terms of how, you know, politically things are occurring. Yeah, and that's not just a political stripe of you're this or you're that, but, you know, there was, I think, more of a maturity about how problems are solved. And unfortunately, I think it's sad that we haven't seen a lot of that. We haven't seen that return. So I'm hoping here in the next couple of years as maybe some things settle down and shake out, that maybe we can get back to that, because I think that's the only way we're gonna get through this. You know, it's too expensive any other way.
Yeah. Nothing like going to the parade, the parade at Christmas time and seeing all the public works trucks from all the different communities, all the fire trucks.
No, we can't. You're right.
Quick question on donations. I see in the text that we have anonymous donations, but I don't see any of those applied to this budget.
So the donations are used for people that have a need but don't qualify under the guidelines of the state for state-backed assistance.
So the line item that says use of donated funds, maybe we don't need.
So there was a board a few years ago that wanted to use donated funds to offset a portion of the town's liability for the state, our 30%. Because the donated funds are given to us with the restriction on them generally that they be used for heating specifically or rent specifically, we can't really use it as a general offset to our 30% liability. But we do use it frequently for people that don't qualify under the state guidelines but still have exhibited a need for service.
Okay. So we're helping the donated funds are helping our residents, but they're not affecting our general assistance budget.
Correct.
So where are the donated funds listed? I think I saw them.
And thank you to those who have
63.
given the anonymous
Huge.
donation funds.
Page
It's very
63.
generous.
What was the page, Megan?
63.
Okay.
So our heating fund, it's got a little over $1,000 in it. There's a miscellaneous one that's got 32,000 in it. And that generally helps people with baby clothes, formula, things like that for people that, or rental assistance, for people that just don't qualify under the regular guidelines, but need help.
That's great.
We got the 36 from West Bay.
Great. Okay, anything else on general assistance? All right, we're on our last item. Still 4 minutes ahead. Debt special assessments, page 315.
On that note, I need to leave, but I will see everyone Monday.
Thanks, Zach.
Bye, Zach.
This could be the barn burner, though.
That's
I don't know what you think, Mike.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm optimistic. Always.
All right.
So there isn't a whole lot that has changed in this budget. This upcoming fiscal year will be our first principal payment for the West Rockport Fire Station. The interest payment for the West Rockport Fire Station is slightly higher than last year's interest only payment. And from here on out, the interest will continue to go down. The principal payment will stay level. There is $25,000 in here for interest on a bond anticipation note. That is for the stream crossing bond that was approved in November. We aren't applying for the spring issue bond period, we're gonna apply in the fall to eliminate some of the long-term interest that we'll pay, because we won't be able to complete all the stream crossing projects this construction season. So we'll take out enough to front this construction season and a bond anticipation note, do the long-term financing in the fall, and we'll have the remaining money that we need during the next construction season.
Any questions for Megan? Okay.
The
go ahead.
VPI grant match bond in the manager column doesn't have interest included compared to the department head, is there?
We ended up removing the VPI grant match bond.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you explain that?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a cart before the horse conversation, but I'll do my best. So there has been apparently some interest, again, day to day with what's in the news. I don't know how to rectify that, but apparently Maine DOT is very interested in the VPI study that was done. They would like to see that entire study placed before Congress and part of their CDS process. So hang on to that, I'll get back to that. Right.
Let's write the check right
Right. So, okay, this was like a month ago, and I'm like, great, this sounds exciting. So, I don't know what's gonna happen, right? But one, DOT likes the project. I think our congressional leadership likes our plan. And basically what would be set up would be that there'd be a 90% would be covered between the state and the feds, and 10% would be the responsibility of the town. So in large part, I think the total cost of what the VPI study called out was about $9 million, which includes the path to the school out West Street, and as well as all of, everything from Pascal, along Pascal all the way up to Graffham's. So that would be, that means the town would then be responsible for about $1 million-ish of cost. Again, 90-10. So a couple things would have to happen. One, we would have to have a vote to borrow that money, because we're not gonna add $1 million to our budget, that's crazy. So one, we'd wanna borrow that, push that out over a long period of time with a minimal impact to the budget, blah, 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 blah. So it's an incredible opportunity. It works hand in hand with the bridge going on. It's phenomenal. Then you read the newspaper, and Friendship is losing a pier, and Rockland's losing an auditorium, and so again, where that sits today as opposed to where it sat 3 weeks ago, I don't know. It's not in here, but could I see? No, we're all full steam ahead tomorrow, and at which point that would be an effort that I would bring back to the board and potentially pursue a bond and da-da-da-da-da. The plan here initially, when things were rosier, is that we would put in, bless you, we would put in the amount for covering that bond in here and leave it, but with no, but we would still have to require a town vote, but by able to say we've already budgeted for that money. But without that assurance and where we are today, I don't feel comfortable about that. So let's just sit back to the table, find out what happens, and then return when we know more. So
I just wasn't sure if it was just we were opting not to pay interest on any bond that we had.
Would be nice.
But we haven't.
We're taking a playbook from some other folks.
Worth a shot.
That would not be a good idea.
We'll come visit you in jail.
Anything else on this? Anything else on the budget? Well, we've got done for this week. Next Monday, we'll be back here at 6, and then Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Did you hear that?
I did not hear that.
Okay, does that work for you?
I will make some calls.
Okay, yeah, we've had a sort of an emergency come up that we can't meet on Wednesday. And you'll send out a note maybe about that,
Yes,
John?
I did let Zach know,
Oh,
because he wasn't
great.
here, so I
That's
did
right.
let
Thanks,
him know.
Michelle.
Yep. So it's mostly public safety on Monday. And I've also got some good news that I'm gonna wait and share you on Monday.
Oh, we're
But-
gonna have to
but-
wait the week.
But it's good news.
That's a
and you get to wait till the end to hear it, so.
Make sure everybody shows up.
Anyway.
Okay.
Waiting with bated breath.
That's right, that's what I'm trying to do.
Megan, what's on the menu for Monday?
I want to talk to you. A little bit.
We're
It's supposed to be
adjourned.
pizza, but we'll
to be
see.
what?
Pizza, but
Oh,
we'll
okay.
see.
Doesn't matter. I like pizza.
I know, but it gets old after a while.
Plan.